Chapter 5:14. Mino adjusted the power output to the maximum. The spare mana core provided energy to the propeller at maximum power. The airtight compartment discharged the seawater, and the jellyfish rose rapidly. Even at full power, A13 was still operating smoothly. The airflow made a soft humming sound as it passed through the valve. The indicator on the dashboard jumped, and all the values were within a reasonable range. Without a doubt, this was indeed a sophisticated deep-diving machine. However, the underwater vibration caused by the explosion of the armored whale caused a chain reaction. Seawater was an excellent sound conductor. The loss of sound waves was smaller than in the air. This allowed the sea tribe, who were deeper and farther, to discover this target. Soon, a large number of fish followed the sound and swam over. Damn it! Mino stared at the dashboard that displayed various operating conditions. Suddenly he cursed, "Defense. There's a spellcaster among these D***ned fish." As a student who had successfully graduated from the Imperial Military Academy, even an ordinary person was required to have the knowledge and ability to distinguish magic. When jellyfish A13 lost its direction and its horizontal axis could not be calibrated, Mino immediately sensed that something was wrong. He tried his best to escape. However, he was still one step too late. At a depth of 800 meters, the deep-diving device could no longer rise. A spellcaster had created a defense to seal off this area, blocking his way. A spellcaster has been found among the sea tribe. The area above A13 has been sealed off. Please check, he reported. His eyes were fixed on the rapidly approaching fish. It seemed that these sea tribe members were working together and saw him as a prey that they had to catch. Mino clenched his teeth. He knew that he would die if he did not do anything. There was no time to wait for a response from the command center. He decided to give it a try. He did not try to rise anymore. Instead, he controlled the deep-diving device to descend rapidly. The oxygen tank was an enchanted equipment. The amount of oxygen it contained was much more than expected. It could support his underwater activities for a long time. If he could sink to the bottom of the sea and avoid the sea tribe's line of sight, he might have a chance to survive after the fleet was cleaned up. The feeling of supergravity suddenly disappeared, and what followed was a feeling of weightlessness. Jellyfish A13 was falling to the bottom of the sea, and the depth chart rose rapidly. Mino knew very well that if he wasn't inside the jellyfish, the terrifying water pressure in the deep sea would have killed him immediately. Only legendary warriors could survive in such an environment. Jellyfish A13, the North Wind is attempting to remove the lock. It is estimated that it will be completed in 1 minute. Please prepare to return. At this time, the voice of the radio operator finally came. I'm currently sinking to avoid the sea tribe, Mino reported. If everything goes well, I hope to return after the cleansing is complete. There was silence on the other end of the communicator. Clearly, the command center understood a 13th current situation. After a short pause, a reply came through the channel. Roger that. The North Wind will release 10 Thunderfish to assist you. Keep in touch. The Thunderfish was a type of underwater precision-guided weapon. Its prototype was the self-destructing puppet fish of the Southern Empire. Its remote-controlled, timed detonation characteristic won Caesar's favor. Thus, after the Blackwing Weapon Research Institute's dedicated research and repeated improvements, the Goblins added more industrial attributes to it, making it more suitable for mass production. They renamed it Thunderfish. Nowadays, this kind of weapon had been equipped with the Empire's naval fleet on a large scale. The soldiers called it the Shadow Killer to describe its small size, flexibility, and great power. Understood. Mino felt more assured after hearing the command center's arrangements. After the North Wind finished breaking through the defense, the Thunderfish quickly reached where Jellyfish A13 was. The submersible vessel continued to sink. 1,500, 1,800, 2200. Logically speaking, the sea tribe should be staying in the shallow waters, waiting for an opportunity to attack the fleet. However, what Minua did not expect was that as he gradually sank to the bottom, the sea tribes surrounding him did not decrease. Instead, they increased. The deep sea, which was supposed to be pitch black, gradually became brighter. Clear light shone through the observation window. The color of the water was like a flowing silver glow. The thunderfish exploded around the submersible vessel one after another to fend off more and more demon hunting sharks and armored whales. Through the naked eye, Minua saw a gigantic crimson squid waving its tentacles. The ends of the tentacles were filled with the glow of magic. It was obvious that this monster had built the defense in the waters below the fleet from a long distance away. Minua became uneasy. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. Thud, thud. The submersible vessel was hit. The 10 thunderfish that followed him down had already been used up. Here, he saw the target of his initial mission, a school of spear swordfish. These sea tribe members had strange mouths that were shaped like long darts. Their bodies were long and slender, and they swam extremely fast. They flashed past his vision. Thud! The spear swordfishes attacked. The submersible shook violently, and the iron frame on the surface of the submersible made a teeth-numbing sound. The surging water slapped on the shell of the jellyfish, and the whole sea was stirred up by the shoals of fish. Schools of swordfish quickly flashed across the horizon, and huge armored whales appeared one after another. Demon hunting sharks also entered the range of the submersible. The dark steel tanks installed on both sides of Jellyfish A-13 were damaged. The steel walls of the deep-sea oxygen tanks that the Empire had prepared for jellyfish were a few centimeters thick. They were also enchanted. However, they were still the weakest part of the submersible vessel. They could not withstand the spear swordfish's attack. After being hit, a few holes were torn open, and the oxygen escaped through the cracks. Minua suddenly realized why he was surrounded the moment he was discovered. Armored whales, demon hunting sharks. Countless sea tribe members rushed over immediately. There was even the spellcasting squid to help. It turned out that the gathering place of the sea tribe was below. A slender figure was swimming in the clear water. Its long tail was swaying slowly, and its movements were calm and unhurried. However, anyone could see that it could burst out with astonishing speed at any time, rushing towards its target like an arrow. It was a giant demon hunting shark. Its whole body was covered in a deathly white bone shell. It was hard to imagine that such a creature existed in the ocean. When it appeared, the other sea tribe members consciously avoided it. It looked like the leader of the demon hunting sharks. Crack, crack. The leader of the demon hunting sharks had its eyes on the jellyfish. It pounced over quickly, opened its mouth, and bit the tail of the submersible vessel. It swung its jaws and tore at it. The jellyfish shook violently, and the propeller made a cracking sound. After a while, it released its jaws and flung the submersible vessel away. It was tossed to the sharks that were waiting nearby. They teased the submersible vessel as if they were competing for their prey. There was a leak in the oxygen supply tank, a leak in the watertight compartment, a breakdown in the transmission system, a failure in the engine. The warning light on the main control panel flashed crazily. Minua knew that the submersible vessel had lost the ability to return. A-13, we received a distress signal from the submersible vessel. Please report your situation. An urgent voice came from the communicator. I'm fine. Minua gave a simple reply. Then, he unilaterally turned off the communication with the command center. At this time, he guessed that the sea tribe members were probably using sound to locate his location. Thus, he fumbled around and cut off the engine. He closed all the valves, leaving only the magic patterns on the jellyfish to hide. Then, he continued to sink like a rock. Although he could not return, he still wanted to do something before he was completely torn apart. 3,100, 3,400, 4,200. Light shone in from the porthole. He saw rows of deep-sea murlocs, sea dragons with mouths full of sharp teeth, acid squid that oozed venom, and many other species that he could not name. The needle on the depth chart swayed. Jellyfish A13 floated in the deep sea with difficulty. It tilted slightly. All the lights on the instrument panel flickered for a while before they were all extinguished. The magic core that flickered also stopped working. The cockpit was filled with the sound of airflow. Minua knew that this first-generation submersible vessel of the Blackwing Empire had done all it could. Now it was sleeping peacefully. He slumped into the seat tiredly. The lack of oxygen made it difficult for him to move. He groped around sluggishly and found the independent single-line communicator in the cockpit. He dialed, "North Wind, this is A13, as if understanding his current situation, the quiet and cold communicator's voice seemed to have become gentle. "Roger that. Go ahead. I have entered the hinterland of the Sea Tribe. Please locate my depth coordinates and clear the target. I repeat, clear the target." After a moment of silence, the voice on the other end of the communicator said, "The message has been sent to the command center. You." Minua, whose brain was lacking oxygen, could no longer hear the other party's response clearly. He squinted his eyes and muttered to himself in a daze, "I may not be able to return this time. All of you must work hard. Okay. For the Empire. For the Empire." Chapter 5:15. Positioning complete. Weapon cleaning has been activated. Removing safety lock. Please enter the passcode. Crendo stared at the signal of Jellyfish A13 before it disappeared. With a cold expression, he entered the passcode that only he knew of into the Magitech system and ordered the launching of the underwater weapons carried by the Empire's grasp. Only Meow Meow and a few others knew that before the Northern Fleet set sail, Hogg had been ordered by the Emperor to place a secret weapon on the Empire's grasp, the Annihilation Sphere disguised as an underwater bomb. It did not come from the Black Dragon but from Odin. With Caesar's ability, he could of course create a weapon more powerful than this. However, due to the pollution in Caesar's energy, if he were to throw the nuclear weapon into the sea, the entire Imperial Sea would probably be polluted. Furthermore, it would spread to land through the atmosphere. It was not worth it to do this in his own territory. Therefore, in the end, Odin's Annihilation Sphere became the trump card of the Northern Fleet. The time is 4:25 p.m. I am the fleet's Commander-in-Chief, Crendo Statham. I order the launching of the weapon cleaning, Crendo said. The frigates will set up a defensive net to prevent any possible counterattacks. The orders were quickly carried out. The Northern Fleet set up the deep-sea bombs in a spiral pattern. These bombs would automatically float in the sea at a depth of 100 meters, forming a complete defensive net. They were originally designed to deal with ambushers sent by the enemy, but now they were used to intercept things deeper in the sea. At the same time, the pitch-black weapon compartment of the Empire's grasp flagship silently opened. A rusty iron box silently fell out. The first layer of its outer shell was peeled off when it was 500 meters underwater, and then the second layer was peeled off when it was 1,000 meters underwater. Sink, sink. In the end, it turned into a metal ball the size of a human fist. It slowly and inconspicuously reached the predetermined location. Around it were groups of deep-sea frogmen, demon-hunting sharks, and swordfish, as well as the casting crimson cuttlefish and ferocious sea dragons. It was detonated. Black flowers bloomed in the water. This was the most condensed state of Odin's annihilation energy. The flowers spun slowly in the sea for a second and then immediately collapsed. What followed was a terrifying annihilation storm. A large number of creatures were instantly vaporized. The frogmen were turned into ashes immediately. The huge armored whales were turned into dust before they could even make a sound. The sea dragons fled like crazy, but they still could not escape from the Reaper's scythe. The black hole roared in the deep sea, as if a demon from another world was letting out a terrifying roar. "Kill rate of 42%, Krender whispered. "They're coming." At this time, in the central control room of the Empire's grasp, the projection showed the results of the magic scan. After suffering a sudden attack, the remaining seafolk were rapidly rising from the bottom of the sea. They swore to take revenge like crazy. The barrier formed by the depth charges was 100 meters underwater. The dense light formed a net-like structure, waiting for the seafolk to pounce. In the next moment, the seafolk that were rapidly floating up collided with the barrier formed by the deep-water bombs. These bombs would explode upon contact, and each one would release a powerful shockwave and thousands of enchanted steel balls. The trajectory of these steel balls and shockwaves would form a perfect sphere, cutting apart every creature that came into contact with it. People saw a dazzling scene below the surface of the sea, as if fire was rising from the bottom of the sea. A second later, the shockwave of the depth charges had reached the surface of the sea, and white waves soared into the sky. "Get ready!" the commanders of the various ships roared. The searchlights lit up like the boiling sea. Bullet chains slid into the barrels of the guns, the main cannons of the ships were preheated, and the cannons were ready to fire. Everyone's eyes were on the surface of the sea. The blue sea roared angrily, and the steel fleet swayed along with it. It was as if there was a great force accumulating below that could tear the sea apart at any time. The seafolk tore apart all obstacles, wanting to fight the warships head-on. Attack! In the next second, various creatures jumped out of the sea from the white wave. There were demon hunting sharks with long tails, amphibious fishmen with tridents in their hands, as well as armored whales and giant sea monsters that could even move the ships. Using the huge impact of the explosives, they jumped 5 to 10 meters above the sea surface like predatory beasts, hoping to climb up to the deck and kill the humans on the steel warship. However, at the instant they were about to emerge from the water, the guns installed on the ships had already begun to fire. After so many years had passed, the weapons and equipment of the Blackwing Empire had already undergone an upgrade. These guns were all new weapons, with 48 gun barrels fixed within a cylinder. The gunner could fire 48 bullets at a time through a joystick. Furthermore, the gunner only needed to change the locking block to complete the reloading operation. After actual combat testing, a skilled gunner could even reach a terrifying firing rate of 250 bullets per minute under the operation of this type of gun. The rain of bullets poured from the warships onto the sea surface, almost immediately tearing the poor frogmen into pieces. Dense sparks burst out when the bullets hit the hard bodies of the demon hunting sharks. Many of the demon hunting sharks were forced back into the sea by the rain of bullets. The thunderfish of the frigates had already been fired. This weapon had proven to be outstanding. It was delicate, flexible, and powerful. It drew a white mark on the surface of the sea, and after a precise guidance, it completed the explosion. The main cannons of the warships were the main weapons, and there was no doubt about their power. Just the violent flames and deafening sounds were enough to frighten the creatures in the sea and make them flee. The wind and clouds on the sea suddenly changed. Dark clouds gathered and thunderclouds rolled. King Busto was no doubt the god of wrath. She entrusted her divine power to change the weather, changing the climate to a more suitable environment for the seafolk to fight. Attack, continue. There was no time to set up a network of bombs, so the seafolk that came next were not stopped at all. Thousands of figures jumped out of the water again, and the fleet suffered casualties for the first time. Some of the demon hunting sharks turned their bodies and landed on the warship. They used their sharp fangs to bite the flaming cannons, twisting the cannons out of shape. The cannons immediately exploded, and the gunners were swallowed by the flames. The injured demon hunting sharks took advantage of the shock wave to fall back into the sea and immediately dove deeper. The steel warships spewed out deadly flames. Their voices were louder and more impassioned than the screams of the seafolk. The sea was shaken by the terrible roars of this fleet, and shells after shells sank to the bottom of the sea with the seafolk. The concentrated machine guns of the Save stopped firing, and so did the main cannons. Seawater splashed onto the red-hot barrels of the guns, producing hissing sounds of quenching. There was a limit to the weapons produced by the current industrial level, and if they were used any more, they would explode. However, the Save did not stop. The steam turbines operated at maximum power, and the warships spewed out white smoke. All weapons were fired, including armor-piercing bullets, anti-air missiles, and disruptive turbulence. These weapons were not suitable to be used against the seafolk, but there was nothing to be said at this point. The so-called battle to the death was to throw stones at the enemy. Launch the guided missiles, all of them, Kendo said. Win the war at all costs. Thousands of guided missiles slid into the launch rails from the magazine and were fired on the spot. Flames rose one after another under the black sky. These first-generation guided missiles rose and fell, and flames rose on the sea. The seafolk's roars sounded like they were crying, and their attacks were getting weaker and weaker. Chapter 5:16. The attack of the seafolk came to an end. They screamed unwillingly, but under the orders of their leader, they had no choice but to retreat into the sea. The sea was filled with broken corpses and wreckage. The blood-stained battleships were anchored in the ruins, and steam rose into the air. The sea became even calmer. All the enemies had escaped into the water, but Kendo was not at ease. He stared at the surface of the sea where there were no more living creatures. His back trembled, and uneasiness brewed in his heart. The leader of the seafolk, Hill Canis, still had not appeared. Were they planning to retreat in such a hurry? Before the soldiers of the fleet could cheer for their victory, a bright bolt of lightning flashed above their heads, illuminating Kendo's gloomy face before disappearing. "How dare you slaughter the people of the sea like this?" A rumbling voice came from the bottom of the sea. "Now only destruction awaits you. Feel the anger of the furious gods." The surface of the sea that was hidden in the dark clouds suddenly lit up as if it was on fire. The intersection between the sky and the sea was especially bright, as if the sun had appeared on the surface of the sea. Then, it was as if a divine palace had floated up in the sea. The bright palace was brighter than any mirage, and the sky and sea were illuminated by the palace into a dazzling white. "Divine kingdom," someone in the fleet murmured in a daze. Thunder and lightning flashed in the sky, and the waves on the sea were like walls. Amidst the sound of the whirlpool, a nightmarish figure appeared on the waves. She looked like a blue-green female with only the upper half of her body, but she was as majestic as a titan. She wore a top made of shells and a purple cloak made of jellyfish. Her fingertips were sharp and her elbows were fins. Her eyes were as white as pearls, and her hair was made of seaweed that danced in the wind. The goddess of the ocean, Umberlee. Amidst the terrified cries of the people, the temperature on the sea plummeted, and a snowstorm arrived. The harsh winter shrouded the area, and the remaining flames on the sea were immediately extinguished. Another god revealed her true appearance. It was the beautiful and cruel goddess of winter, Oler. She appeared in the snow and looked at the mortals on the sea with a cold gaze. She had arrived together with the goddess of the ocean. As if the people on the ground were not desperate enough, two huge blood moons rose from the sea. They were not moons, but the eyes of a giant beast. The god of the hunt, Maler, appeared on the other side of the sky, bringing with him an unparalleled smell of blood. He greedily sized up the living people on the fleet, his sharp teeth grinding. In the divine kingdom further away, the lightning mark shone brightly. That was the divine emblem of Talos. Although the Lord of Storms and Calamity had not appeared, he was still watching the battlefield from afar. It was no exaggeration to say that the furious gods had all stepped into the battlefield. Winter, tsunamis, storms, and catastrophes. The gods used their unparalleled power to control everything on the ground. The steel fleet swayed like a small boat in the tide. Everyone could not help but shiver in the harsh winter. The wind and rain splashed on the deck of the ships, and every ship let out an ear-piercing alarm. Umberlee's pale eyes were lifeless. She did not say a word. She gently raised her hand and pulled out an ancient rusty trident. Then, without any fancy moves, she thrust it forward. The furious tsunami surged with the goddess of the ocean's movement. The seawater gathered into a huge flowing trident. The tip of each wave was sharp, and it rushed toward the shaking North Sea fleet. "Activate the protective shield!" Crendo shouted in the rain. With the Empire's grasp as the center, the magic cores of every warship were overloaded. They jointly raised a layer of dark protective shield to protect the fleet. The seawater full of divine power crashed into the protective shield of the fleet. The front of the shield shattered into scattered waves, but the seawater behind immediately followed, violently pouring into the dark shield. The smaller patrol ships were the first to let out a sharp whistle, followed by the frigates, destroyers, and giant-class battleship. Their magic cores had been overclocked and exploded, causing permanent damage. On the other side, the noisy seawater also came to an end. The divine power contained in the goddess of the ocean's attack had finally been exhausted. "Is this a god?" Crendo's lips trembled as he looked at the report on the hull of the Empire's grasp. Although the magic core of the main ship was not destroyed, it was exhausted and could not be used again. It needed to be returned to the Empire's headquarters to recharge before it could be activated again. As the captain of the ship, no one knew better than Crendo how high the defense level of the main ship was. The Empire's grasp, Northern Dawn, and breath of the Holy Dragon were the symbols of the Blackwing Empire's dominance on the sea. They were the embodiment of the Empire's best industrial technology and magical engineering standards. They were built at an immeasurable cost. However, these painstaking efforts of the Empire had been completely destroyed by a single attack from a god. Crendo felt that his faith had suffered a huge blow. However, what he did not know was that this scene was an even bigger blow to the gods. It was not that there were no things in the astral world that could fight or even defeat the gods, such as the Titans, evil creatures, abominations, and legendary dragons. However, those that could fight against the gods with foreign objects were all famous things in the vast history, such as the Alliance of Stars, the Arcane Empire, and the Quell Dorii race in the Iradia continent recently. These terrifying mortal organizations had a common name in the eyes of the gods: civilization. In the eyes of the gods, these civilizations were no different from hatred, evil creatures, and even abyssal demons. They were all enemies of the gods that were extremely difficult to deal with. Therefore, the scene that had just unfolded had shocked them even more. The Blackwing Empire had manifested the embryonic form of a brand new civilization. Even the evil, chaotic, and furious gods had realized that they had to nip this bud in the bud. Hunt, slaughter. Malor growled. This beast's thoughts were not as rich as the other gods. It was filled with a boiling desire to kill. After conspiring with Tiamat to plot against the god of war, this beast had obviously gained many benefits and had become stronger. Unknowingly, the northern fleet in the sea had turned white. Ice and snow covered the guns and cannons, sealing the entire fleet in ice. These mortals did not even have a chance to escape, let alone fight back. Crendo stared at the gods in the sky in despair. He moved his frozen fingers and gripped his sword tightly. His throat moved as he used all his strength to shout, "Everyone, prepare for battle. Everyone must die." The cold laughter echoed in the icy sea. The god of Hunt had transformed his head into a giant black wolf. He opened his mouth like a black hole, wanting to swallow the entire northern fleet in one fell swoop. "Long time no see, Malor." Before the voice of the god of Hunt had completely dissipated, another deep voice sounded. "I say, you guys came to visit Iradia. Why didn't you come to see me first? What's the meaning of bullying mortals?" Chapter 5:17. Caesar. Malor turned around warily. A pitch-black crack appeared in the sky, and the crack was filled with chaos and turbulence. The black dragon stretched out its sharp front claws, and then it tore the crack open as if it was expanding. The crack that was a few miles long stretched across the sky, and a huge body squeezed out from it. The giant dragon flapped its wings and confronted the gods, floating above the frozen fleet. The Law Emperor had the ability to shatter space. After using this move to deal with Lich King Aglaran, Caesar had gained a lot of inspiration. He already knew how to use his own power to tear space apart and teleport, and even travel between planes. "Your Majesty," Croendo opened his mouth. The black dragon's golden eyes narrowed as he stared at the lightning emblem in the depths of the divine palace. "Controlling the sea tribe is your business, but you shouldn't interfere in the war of mortals. Who do you think you are, the ruler of Iradia?" Maelor growled sarcastically. Ever since the spatial crack appeared, the black dragon had only stared at the emblem in the depths of his divine kingdom. He did not look at the three gods who had appeared. However, when Maelor finished speaking, he suddenly turned his head and glanced at where the black-blooded beast was. Emperor's decree immediately took effect, and the space there seemed to be cut into pieces by countless knives. Maelor's projection also disappeared in an instant. "Watch your words," Caesar said casually. "This is a small warning." Maelor, who had reformed his body, was about to explode in anger. It would have been fine if the black dragon had argued with him verbally, but the other party looked down on him and did not take him seriously at all. This made Maelor so angry that he wanted to roar. No creature in the prime material plane had ever dared to treat him like this. He was the god of the hunt, the king of beasts. However, what Maelor did not want to admit was that while he was angry, there was also some fear and worry in the depths of his thoughts. Since when had this dragon become so powerful? He was so powerful that he could shatter his own incarnation without him being able to react. In just one exchange, he had already lost a portion of his divine power. Of course, this was not enough to make Maelor retreat. Even though he was a god, he was still a beast. When a beast was hurt, it would become even crazier and more hysterical. The divine palace behind him gave him the confidence to roar at Caesar. The avatars of the other two gods, Umberlee, the goddess of the sea, and Oler, the goddess of winter, were also becoming clearer and more active. They were pouring more divine power into the Eladian prime material plane. Obviously, these gods did not intend to leave so easily. "If that's the case," Caesar flapped his wings, dispelling all magical damage inflicted on the frozen fleet below. "Let me test the toughness of the raging gods." Thus the battle broke out. The battle between the black dragon and the gods was far from what the mortals of this world could hope to see. The northern fleet could only retreat far enough to ensure their safety. Only then did they dare to watch the battle through the telescopes on the ship. "Quick, use the gemstones to record it," Cronor excitedly said to his deputy. Kendo said excitedly to his assistant, "If we can preserve the image of His Majesty fighting against the gods, the people in the publicity department will definitely kneel down and beg us." If the gods were rational enough, they would have realized that pouring divine power into Iradia was meaningless. They couldn't kill Caesar, this was without a doubt. But even if they realized this, the proud gods of raging gods were not willing to give up so easily. Their chaotic and evil nature made them happy to fight against a super, god-like dragon. Umberlee blocked Caesar's attack with a huge wave. With the support of the sea, her avatar's physique and strength were not to be underestimated. This was also the reason why she could block Caesar's attack. Because of the iron armor, the black dragon's weight was more than 50,000 tons. His 70-meter-long body was charging at a speed of hundreds of kilometers per hour. To withstand such a force was no different from holding up a falling mountain. But Umberlee was able to do it, which was somewhat beyond Caesar's expectations. The power of the sea is limitless. This seemingly fragile female god used a hand made of water to block the black dragon. At the same time, she waved a huge rusty trident towards Caesar's body. The trident collided with the black dragon's scales with a loud sound. The force of the impact almost caused Umberlee's divine power to collapse, and she couldn't maintain the shape of the weapon in her hand. The black dragon groaned. Umberlee's weapon was sharp enough to make him feel pain. After so many years, Caesar finally felt the thrill of battle once again. The sea god slashed his scales with a huge trident, and the black-blooded beasts pounced on him and bit his carapace. This kind of pain and pleasure was definitely not something that he could experience when fighting the Lich, who only knew how to use weak magic to hide. The dragon's blood gradually boiled, and Caesar let out an excited roar. The blood brought by close combat instantly cleared away his boredom of doing nothing all day long, and let the black dragon experience his own fresh life once again. An evil dragon born from blood and fire would eventually return to blood and fire. "Come on, all of you together!" Caesar shouted excitedly, his mouth full of burning flames. In the eyes of mortals, this was an epic battle. The black dragon began to swing its battering ram-like tail. At the same time, its steel-like jaw also became a ramming weapon. The dragon opened its mouth wide and began to bite. Its mind was filled with thoughts of melee combat, and it had forgotten all about psionic powers and laws. It was the same for the gods of Berserk, but they were forced to do so. Everyone knew that divine spells and magic could not harm this dragon. It had been a long time since Caesar had fought to his heart's content. Whenever it was his turn, he would settle his problems with a single breath. It was rare that his opponents, such as the infernal Lord Azrael's and the Lich King Aglarin, did not have the ability to engage in close combat with him. However, the battle prowess of the gods of fury was unexpectedly strong. The winter god used ingenious footwork to avoid the black dragon's heavy blows several times. The sea god was able to contend with him in terms of strength. Although Malor was slightly weaker, he relied on the attributes of the hunting god to unexpectedly tear apart his scales. But overall, Caesar's nerves were still relatively relaxed. After all, the difference between the two sides was obvious. If the gods had come in their true bodies, the black dragon would have fought with his life, but the opponents were only avatars. These avatars could not even withstand Caesar's bite. If the black dragon bit them with his mouth full of sharp teeth, the gods of wrath would lose a lot of their divine power. They fought from the sea to the island and then to the land. The battle between the mystic dragon and the gods almost destroyed everything in sight. They set off a super tsunami of nearly 1,000 meters, cracked the island and sank it. Then, they flattened the hills, burned the rainforest, and detonated all the volcanoes from the scorched rock island in the North Sea to the eastern continent. The night turned into day, and after that, there was a super earthquake that could be felt even in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Almost all of the Eladian legends and above sensed this huge disaster. They were also able to determine how terrifying the culprit of this disaster was through the level of the energy that was dissipating. They trembled in fear as if they were chicks that were about to be destroyed. Of course, there were also some who were not afraid of death, who chose to go closer to watch the battle, but they were soon overturned by the aftermath of the battle. For an entire day and night, Caesar enjoyed this battle to his heart's content. In the end, the gods of wrath chose to retreat. During this time, Malor's avatar was torn apart countless times. After entering the land, Umberlee no longer had the power to contend with the black dragon. The only one who was more decent, Oler, was also exhausted. They could no longer fight. Perhaps because Caesar had been holding back, the Lord of Calamity, Talos, the main god of the gods of wrath, did not appear from the beginning to the end. Chapter 5:18. When Kaiser returned to his own territory, an uninvited guest suddenly appeared in the courtyard of the Blackwing Empire's imperial court. Talos, the Lord of Storm Calamity, the master god of great divine power, the ruler of the gods of wrath, Talos. He retracted his divine power and appeared silently in front of Caesar, standing lightly. As one of the most powerful gods among the gods, this god's appearance was a combination of many of his divine features. His appearance was based on a human, but not a mortal. There were devil horns on both sides of his head, and his arms were covered with scales and horn-like protrusions that represented the sea. His legs were the sharp feet of birds. He was a one-eyed god, and in his empty eye sockets were lightning sparks. In the original year, the Lord of Calamity was born in the battle between the night god Shar and the moon god Serene. He mastered the power of nature that could destroy everything. Telos. There was no need for self-introduction. Caesar already knew who he was just by smelling the divine power of destruction. You smell like a devil. Really? Thank you for the compliment. Being compared to his mortal enemy, this god did not seem to be angry at all. I know that there is a real devil hiding in your place. Caesar's expression changed slightly. Are you looking for it? That's not it. Telos stared at Black Dragon, and blue lightning burned in his empty eye socket. Compared to it, I am more interested in you. In the human description of the gods, the Lord of Storm, Telos, was a cruel, impatient, and irritable god. This guy often flew into a rage, and was a powerful bully who sought revenge for the smallest grievance. He was extremely addicted to chaos and destruction. But now, his behavior in front of Caesar did not seem to be so. Just now, Black Dragon had a fight with the gods of wrath, and the gods who fought lost at least a few years of divine power to recover. But Telos did not seem to care at all. He spoke calmly and seemed to be in a good mood. But it was also true that these chaotic and evil gods had no friendship with each other. The Lord of Storm also ruled other gods with power and violence. As long as it did not affect his own interests, Telos would not have any emotions because of the setbacks of the gods under his command. Black Dragon raised his eyes and looked at the Lord of Storm, waiting for him to continue. Telos spoke in a seductive tone, "Your power is strong, but not enough. It's not even enough for you to leave the prime material plane. Now, a brand new opportunity has appeared in front of you. Embrace storms and natural disasters. That's enough." Caesar curled his lips and waved his claws. "You gods are all the same. This is too old. I've seen it countless times." "Is that so?" Telos looked interested. "Tell me, which gods have looked for you?" "Malat, Tiamat, Bahamut." The Black Dragon fiddled with his claws. "But in the end, everyone's relationship seems to be a little strained, so it's better not to speak, lest we get angry." The Lord of Storm let out a shrill laugh. "You've only met low-level gods. They can't give you anything useful. Young dragon, do you know what it means for you to embrace storms and disasters? It's something countless people dream of. I can help you ascend to godhood. Join the Heart of Fury and become one of us." Telos spoke in a bold tone. "From now on, you will be the dragon god alongside Tiamat and Bahamut, the Lord of Calamity. What do you think? Isn't that a good name?" Although it was a little arrogant, Telos was not exaggerating. He was telling the truth. As the ruler of the Heart of Fury and a greater god, the Lord of Storms had the ability to bestow divinity upon mortals. He had done so many times before. The most recent one was the god of Lich, Visharan. That guy was just an ordinary red-robed mage when he was alive, but because he was favored by Telos, he was promoted to a god. However, that guy defected in the end and was still alive in the pursuit of the Storm Lord. He could only live under the protection of the god of mages and the god of magic. Telos was very ambitious. Over the years, he had been looking for dragons with potential and who were willing to serve him. He helped them become gods so that they could compete for the faith of Tiamat and Bahamut. Unfortunately, those dragons failed to ignite their divine fire because of their own problems and became incompetent evil dragon servants. He had visited this world thousands of years ago. At that time, the Lord of Storms had found an excellent target for himself, the red dragon, Kuan Gu Dios. Unfortunately, the powerful red dragon rejected him and only maintained a temporary alliance with him. After that, he met the mad clamor, but the white dragon was really annoying. Now that Talos had descended again, he thought that the candidate of the dragon god of fury had appeared again. The name is good, but the most important thing is the divine power and divine power, isn't it? The black dragon's voice was like two serrated swords rubbing against each other. The most you can give me is a divine power and a certain divine power. That's not enough to satisfy me. Then what do you want? Talos felt that there was still room for negotiation. Those three guys just now, Hunt, Ocean, and Winter, I want you to find a way to take their divine power and your scourge. Give them all to me. The black dragon's eyes were burning like torches. In fact, when thinking about the future, Caesar did not want to ignite his divine fire and become a god. Instead, he planned to walk the path of hatred and evil to strengthen himself. But he was a very realistic guy. If Talos really agreed to give him these divine powers, then he could change his mind and climb the shortcut to become a dragon god. It was not impossible to work for the Lord of Storms. But Talos hesitated. He could not help but hesitate, not to mention whether it was worth it to take the divine powers from the gods of wrath for the black dragon and how difficult it was to implement this plan. If he really gave the black dragon the divine powers of Hunt, Ocean, Winter, and Scourge, the monster would become unprecedentedly powerful as soon as he became a god. He might even be able to rival a great god like himself. At that time, who would be the master of the Heart of Wrath? Would he really be able to control this ambitious dragon? Hunt and Scourge, I can only give you these two at most. Talos thought for a while and sold Marat out in a few words. Why? You can't bear to part with the two goddesses? Caesar smiled mischievously. He felt that talking to this guy was quite easy. So there's nothing to talk about? The Lord of Storms nodded. Even for me, there is a limit to my ability. This is the best I can give you. Do you need the honor guards of the Blackwing Empire to send you off? Don't worry. Talos was still not angry after being rejected. Based on this conversation alone, he did not feel like the Lord of Destruction and Storms, but like a good old man like Bahamut. Since we can't talk about this, let's change to the next thing. I want to make a deal with you. Not interested. Caesar turned around and wagged his tail, ready to end the conversation. Young dragon, let me finish. Talos smiled. I'm very interested in the magic of destruction and madness, so I've made some preparations. If you help me attract the attention of the goddess of magic to the main material world, I can take this part of the divine powers. The operation is simple and the reward is generous. You have nothing to repay me. Is that so? Is it because it's so convenient that you forgot that it belongs to someone else? Talos' meaningful words startled Caesar. He sensed that the other party was implying something. The black dragon turned his head. What do you mean? Don't you think it's strange? Why hasn't Gawushin come to you to get his eyeball back? You know, it belongs to him in the first place. If he wants to take it, you can't stop him. Talos smiled. Caesar did not speak. He stared at Talos' empty eye sockets that were burning with lightning. An incredible idea appeared in his mind. Chapter 5:19. Talos and Guash were the same person, or rather, the same god. When Talos told Caesar this secret, his first reaction was, of course, doubt. In the records of dragons, humans, and other creatures, there had never been a god who could put on the clothes of another god, have two sides of the same body, and master the priesthoods and divine powers that were completely unrelated to the faction. But after all, that was a god in the eyes of mortals. The boundary of a true god's power, perhaps only they themselves could clearly explain. Shoo! Talos seemed to be very satisfied with the black dragon's hesitant expression at the moment. He narrowed his eyes and said, You are the first creature to know this, please keep it a secret. Talos and Guish are the same person. Caesar repeatedly chewed on his words and stared at his empty eye socket. How did you do it? What do you mean, how did I do it? I know that gods can snatch each other's priesthoods and divine powers, but it is very difficult to kill them, let alone the main gods like Talos and Guish. But you actually have all the others' priesthoods and divine powers, which proves that the other god is completely dead. How did you do it? Oh, you think too much, young dragon. The floating god smiled kindly. There is no bloody and dark devouring and snatching. Talos and Guish are both me, and it has been so since the beginning of the year. I suddenly feel that it is a bit interesting. Caesar shook his head and slowly turned around. The huge dragon form slowly turned into a small human form. My territory has not entertained guests for a long time. Come in and have a seat? A dark red side door hidden in the wall opened, and the legendary Knoll waited obediently. The incarnation of Talos followed Caesar inside. There was a large table in the elegant black and green hall, and the bookshelves beside it were full of information and documents. There was a wine cabinet in the corner with all kinds of northern brews. It was full of human breath, completely unlike the dragon's residence that was full of gold and treasures. Just by looking at the dense files and reports on the bookshelves, one would think that a diligent king lived here. Caesar sat at the table and motioned Talos to sit anywhere. You told me all this because you were bored and wanted to talk. What's the matter? That's what I said earlier. Talos took out wine glasses and wine from the void and poured a glass for Caesar, as if he was the master of this place. Help me attract the attention of the goddess of magic to the main material world, and I can leave the eyeball to you. It has all my memories as Guish and will be of great use to you. It's already mine, Caesar said. Really? Talos smiled. I don't know if it has told you before, but as a part of my body, as long as it appears in the same plane as me, I can retrieve it at any time, even if it's just an incarnation. Do you want to try? A little. Caesar lowered his head and played with the goblet in his hand. Golden ripples reflected in his eyes. But forget it. If this is the condition, I can help you once. Not just once, but an alliance. Talos said, I admire you, young dragon. We can be allies and face a common enemy together. Caesar continued to stare at the wine in the glass with some hesitation in his eyes. He was always wary of Talos, the ruler of the heart of fury, the lord of storms and calamities, the master god of the orc god system. This guy was definitely not easy to deal with. If he wanted to stand with him, he had to be aware that he would be in trouble. But Talos was right about one thing: they did have a common enemy. Talos and Guish's enemy was Pyro, the sun god, and Caesar's enemy was Lamorhan, Pyro's descendant, which was the empire on which the sun never set. Isn't the alliance of chaos and evil all about backstabbing each other? I've heard that you've backstabbed a lot of people, whether it's Guish or Talos, Caesar said calmly. Is a god who can give up on his own race really trustworthy? Are you talking about the Iradia orcs? Talos drank his wine and said, There's nothing to be ashamed of. We lost the war, so we have to bear the consequences. The orcs will be cursed by the humans, and the orc gods will never be able to appear in this plane. After that, I could only appear as Talos and order the deep-sea races to continuously invade the land to attract the attention and military strength of the humans. This allowed the orcs to leave behind a seed so that they wouldn't be completely wiped out in this plane. Under Pyro's watch, this was all I could do. Caesar did not ask about the conflict between the Achelon orc dynasty and the deep-sea countries. It was probably Talos' trick. At that time, the orcs and the sea races ruled the land and sea respectively, and it was difficult to find an equal enemy. A long period of peace would make these fighting races rot. In order to maintain vigorous combat power, Talos let the two races bite and fight each other, just like raising poisonous insects. It was a method that evil gods always liked to use. Black Dragon sneered in his heart and said, "Tell me, I want to know why the deep-sea countries appeared here." The Empire of the Unsetting Sun sent messengers to the deep sea. Not only for peace talks, they also agreed to release the demonic fish Chemiger captured hundreds of years ago, just to let the deep-sea countries attack the north. Of course, the sea races had no reason to refuse this condition. As Talos spoke, he pulled out a cigar from the void, cut it open and lit it. "Want one? It's good stuff produced in the Salaf world. This thing is also available in the north." Caesar glanced at it. The sea races probably don't know that their master god likes this, right? Otherwise, they would have to use it as a sacrifice. "I know what you're thinking. Do you think that the gods are old antiques sitting on the throne?" Talos pursed his lips but did not explain. Instead, he brought the topic back to the matter just now. "After you caused the Trade Federation to split, the Empire of the Unsetting Sun did not intend to stand by and watch. After they collected all the available information, they decided to let the deep-sea countries attract your attention first, and at the same time, clean up the Trade Federation's northern forces as quickly as possible, cutting off the tentacles that the North extended to the central region. I guess now, the Great Purge has already begun. It's a pity that they can't get what they want." Caesar smiled lightly. There were many people who helped him. Even if he did not mobilize the power of the Empire itself, the Black Dragon could easily control the situation in the central region. "What I didn't expect was that as the Master God, you would pay attention to these things. These are all trivial things for you. What I pay attention to are the gods who are paying attention to these things," Talos said. "It's a bit roundabout, but you should be able to understand." Caesar nodded. "Where there is war, there are gods, just like a flock of crows waiting for carrion." "Good analogy." Talos clapped his hands and praised. "The good gods talk about mercy and justice, but what's the difference between them and the crows when they thirst for faith? Well, about the goddess of magic, I'll call you when the time is right." Talos' figure gradually dissipated. "Also, don't retaliate against the deep-sea countries. We're allies now. Keep Hyrcanus, she's the blessed of Umberlee and Oler. She'll still be useful when the time comes." Chapter 520. When Rune Joseph sat up, it was raining outside the house. Through the window, he could see the ferocious raindrops hitting the floral window. The glass let out a whine as if it could not bear the burden, as if it would shatter at any time. Further away, the heavy rain was washing the ground. Along with the hurricane, ripples appeared on the ground. Boundless dark clouds gathered, as if they were about to swallow this small town. "This is a good rain," Rune Joseph thought. "It is just nice to wash away the thick smell of blood in Van." This was because 2 days ago, a bloody battle had taken place in this fortress. Van Fort was the bridgehead of the city of Kor. It was an important military town used to defend against invading enemies from the east. Half a month ago, Rune had led his family's army here. From a military point of view, his commander had done a good job. After arriving, he had immediately ordered the army to take action, stockpiling food and building defensive fortifications. Rune Joseph was a careful person. He had repeatedly studied and deduced, carefully instructing his subordinates to do every detail. He had tried his best to do everything well and build an impenetrable defense when the enemy arrived. Unfortunately, no matter how careful he was, he could not guard against spies and moles. Someone in the Vaeger's army had selfish motives and revealed Rune Joseph's military deployment and defensive methods to the enemy. Tashamar's army had been circling around Fort Veer for a week. 3 days ago, in the middle of the night, a powerful figure had attacked the wizard tower. More than 20 tower guards, wizard apprentices, and a great wizard had all been killed. Before the garrison commander had arrived, that person had shut down the defense chain and surveillance system of Fort Veer. At the same time, Shanmu's army had begun to take action. They had used strong acid to corrode the dragon-repelling spikes on the city walls. They had used battering rams and heavy hammers to break open the gates of Van Fort. Hissing griffins and hippogriffs had landed on the city walls. Giant wolves and thunder rhinos had roared as they dragged chariots into the square. Dozens of large fires had been set in the city. Fireballs and winds had roared within Van Fort. The hastily organized Vaeger's army had thrown cans of pitch as a counterattack. However, they paled in comparison to the magic cast by the enemy. They were like candles in a burning house. Their bright orange glow seemed so small and powerless in front of the emerald elemental flames. What was even more terrifying was that Shanmu had invited a dragon, the Red Dragon. Although he wasn't old, he was still the real Red Dragon. When Lun rushed to the scene, the giant dragon was angrily roaring on Van Er's moat. The dragon's aura slapped against its exposed face, and the hot wind lifted its crimson cape. A thick flame suddenly descended from the sky. It was more than 10 meters wide, and the light from the explosion caused people to have no choice but to cover their eyes. The flames tore at the city walls and danced on the surface of the water, crackling and hissing. The sound of the flames drowned out all the screams. Everywhere the flames passed, the earth was scorched, and even the city walls were scorched red. Did you hear their screams? Rune Joseph, do you see them burning? He heard Shanmu's voice echoing around him. I know you're watching. Watch carefully. This is all your idea. This is all because of your stupid mistake. He knew of Shanmu's thirst for victory in battle. At this moment, the Federation head of state might be on horseback, wearing bright armor and a crown on his head. It was a silver crown, simple and unadorned, imitating the shape worn by the ancient kings. Lun listened to his opponent's mockery and witnessed the screams and wails of the soldiers. He didn't say a word. Finally, he turned around and left indifferently. The city gate was destined to fall, but it was still uncertain who would win. At this moment, the city was in chaos. Only thick smoke and fire could be seen, and it was impossible to determine the exact situation. However, before this, Rune Joseph had already practiced this in his mind several times. He whistled softly. Not long after Shanmu's army entered Van, the garrison took back control of the Mage Tower, and the defense system of the fortress was reactivated. After receiving Lun's message, the Black Serpent army, who had been waiting for a long time, turned the huge winch. Huge chains emerged from the burning water one after another, dripping with water. Some of them were even stained with sticky garbage and mud. Until the entire chain was taut, the city was firmly locked down as if they were catching criminals. At the same time, the Virgil mages sealed off the airspace. Shanmu had allowed his army to charge in, but they could forget about leaving. Everyone, get into formation. After returning, Rune Joseph ordered his bodyguards to get on his horse. In the eyes of outsiders, he was still a brave noble knight and not a necromancer. He had a war horse with the blood of a subdragon. He wore a neck armor and a helmet, and a fine white silk curtain covered the lower half of his body. Below, he wore heavy chain mail, and the high saddle was plated with mithril. The adjutant handed over a helmet and a battle shield. The shield was forged from elemental black steel. It had a black base and was decorated with a picture of a white bear hugging the world tree. He shouted, Shanmu claims to be the master of the city, but he broke open our city gate and wants to ransack our city. Follow me and slaughter these bastards. Rune Joseph pulled out his long sword, turned his horse around, and rushed towards the burning fire. Thus, a bloody battle unfolded in Van Fort. Dong dong dong, Lun's memories were interrupted. It was raining heavily outside, but the servant knocked on the door of the study to report that the captain of the garrison had come to see him. My king. The captain of the garrison wore a steel half-helmet on his curly black hair. He was drenched from head to toe and had a gloomy expression. He said, We have caught the person who betrayed us, Pina Carey. He stole a teleportation scroll with an imprint and was tracked down by the Archmage. The first traitor since the start of the war, Lund said calmly. He did not even search for this person's name in his mind. But he is not the last one. You deal with him, put his head on a spear, and hang it outside the barracks as a warning to others. But the captain of the garrison hesitated. Carrie has the title of a knight and a small piece of land. Do you want to do as I say? Lund's tone was firm. He knew very well that the more lenient he was, the more traitors would appear, especially at such an unstable time. Although he was very sure, Virgil still had not received any support from the north. The captain of the garrison retreated, and Lund continued to stare blankly at the rain outside the window. 2 days ago, even though the Virgil soldiers did not know about this, Lund, as the commander, had made preparations. In fact, the location of every troop was very particular. When these troops were connected, from the map of Fort Versailles, it was like a huge net that intersected with each other, waiting for the enemy to fall into it. His plan was very successful. When the time was right, the army of Virgil began to divide the enemy like a pack of bloodthirsty wolves. The allied army of the city-states that was attacked from both sides suffered casualties. They had already realized that they had fallen into a trap and tried to rush out of the city, but they were defeated one after another. At this time, Rune Joseph only needed to think about one problem, and that was how to deal with the giant dragon. The dragon was squatting on top of the city wall and spitting fire. Even the bravest warrior would panic when he saw thousands of his companions being engulfed in flames. Moreover, it was the breath of the red dragon and not ordinary flames. It burned very hot, and the flesh in front of the dragon's flames would melt like oil. Very soon, he had an idea. It was true that Virgil's army alone would not be able to deal with a terrifying red dragon in its prime. However, he did not actually need to try to kill the dragon. All he needed to do was to lure the low-intelligence monster away. Arrows could be aimed, spears could be moved, and even magic cannons could be adjusted. However, the red dragon had its own will. Tishanmu could invite it to the battlefield, but he could not control it. In the end, Lund Joseph only used a legendary treasure to lure the terrifying dragon away. As one of the greediest true dragons, the red dragon's desire for treasure was far greater than its desire for slaughter and war. The agreement with Tishanmu was even more insignificant in the dragon's heart. However, Lund was sure that the dragon would come back. We've won. Staring at the rain outside the window, he said softly to himself. After a pause, his tone became firm. We can win. Chapter 521. Nady Andrea had been living a comfortable life recently. As a powerful red dragon in his prime, he owned all the land in the Dragon's Cry mountain range. Some time ago, Tishanmu of the Trade Federation had found him and promised him thousands of treasures and slaves. The red dragon Nady stood on top of the smoking volcano and looked down at his masterpiece with satisfaction. He used the black smoke to warm his stomach. A bunch of insignificant human bugs, fighting for the sake of ridiculous justice and glory. Little do they know that there is something far more important in this world, my treasure. As he spoke, he raised his claws and looked at the thing in his claws with his large dragon eyes. He gently stroked it. Like the other red dragons, Nelly possessed all the characteristics that a pentashade true dragon should possess: greed, arrogance, conceit, and brutality. At this moment, he was deeply pleased with his own wisdom. He did not stay in Fort Versailles for too long and had retreated in time, chasing after more important things. For this, the red dragon obtained a legendary treasure, the painting of Kumas. However, he did not care about the consequences of the departure of the red dragon Nady and the anger and condemnation of the human army's commander Tishanmu. Dragons did not care about the life and death of humans, just like how humans did not care about ants. As for the previous agreement, since Lord Nady had appeared on the battlefield, Shanmu had to fulfill his promise. Otherwise, these lowly people would have to bear the wrath of the Red Dragon, and all the cities would be destroyed. He was very proud of his intelligence and wealth, just like the other Red Dragons. I think this place is not bad. It's warmer than the Dragon's Cry mountain range. Alright, I'll announce the ownership of this land. From today onwards, every mountain, every river, every city, every village, every human, every cow, and every beast will belong to Lord Nady Andrea. Anyone who tries to go against him will face the flames of the Red Dragon. You should feel honored because there is no dragon stronger than me in this world. Nady Amboria's name is destined to spread throughout the multiverse. Just like Koengu, Dios, Aphelion, Xylan, Mad Clamor, Gattuso. Nady listed a series of names. Every one of them was famous in the Star Realm, but the one at the forefront was still the Red Dragon, Koengu Dios. Not only was that guy the most powerful among the mutated dragons, but he was also the role model of all true dragons. Even the most arrogant Red Dragon would be proud of Koengu. Under his rambling, the great Red Dragon, Nady Andrea, had already conquered the entire Trade Federation and was preparing to move on to even greater heights. The Red Dragon was like that. They were indeed the most powerful true dragons in the material plane, but their arrogance far outweighed their actual combat prowess. Regardless of whether it was in Iradia or other planes, adult Red Dragons were extremely rare. Most Red Dragons died prematurely in battle due to their lack of judgment. This also led to another problem. The Red Dragon that could successfully live to adulthood or even to the prime of their lives would become even more arrogant. When their arrogance reached the pinnacle, it could even evolve into delusions, just like this Red Dragon in its prime. However, Nady wasn't just delusional. He did have plans to implement his plan, but in order to achieve such a grand goal, he had to constantly sleep. Perhaps after sleeping for another 700 or 800 years, he would have the power to carry out his plan. The Red Dragon's squinted eyes suddenly widened. A sulfuric smell came out of his nostrils. He looked down at the scorched ground below that had been burned clean. He suddenly opened his wings and said, "Who dares to intrude into the territory of the Burning King?" Not all dragons could unearth spells like early warning and detection from their bloodline, but Nady was an exception. He inherited the detection spell from his mother's inheritance, and he was very talented. This meant that Nady didn't need servants like the guards of the dragon's nest. So he still didn't have any dependents until now. He was a lone dragon. Nady had a premonition that there were living creatures approaching. It wasn't one or two, but a large group. No, it wasn't a large group either, but an army. The dragons were very wary of humans approaching their territory. In this world, there were countless people who dreamed of relying on dragon slaying to get rich overnight and become famous overnight. There were even heroes who made a living by slaying dragons. So no matter whether they were good or evil, the dragons would cast a hostile gaze on humans who approached the dragon's nest without permission. The Red Dragon Nady opened his huge wings and flew toward the crowd that he had detected. After arriving at the destination, Nady didn't appear like his Red Dragon relative. Instead, he hid his presence and watched from above the clouds. This guy boasted that he was smart, and his brain was indeed more clear-headed than the other Red Dragons. He realized that the humans below didn't seem to be easy to provoke. It was a well-trained army. The army below was like a river of interwoven steel, vast and vast as it surrounded the mountains. Nady roughly looked at it. This army had about 30,000 people. The leader was a noble knight wearing gold and silver, and the sitting spellcasters. Behind them were musketeers, archers, and a large number of warriors and spear-wielding soldiers. In the center of the army, there were many huge things covered in black cloth placed on huge trailers. Each trailers was carried by 5 thick thunderhorn rhinoceroses. Nady roughly probed and found that there were black lumps of iron inside. There seemed to be something similar to a magic core. He didn't know much about it, so he didn't pay much attention to it. The hot wind in the mountains beat on the dozens of flags that were held high above their heads. Nady had some understanding of the central human forces, but he was very unfamiliar with these flags. In addition, the army carried provisions and supplies. The Red Dragon judged that this was not an army from the central region, but from the farther north. It seems that these humans don't know that this is my territory. Should I let them pass? This thought flashed through the Red Dragon's mind, but Nalai immediately shook his head. I am the descendant of the ancestral Red Dragon, Andrea. These puny humans dare to offend me. A nameless fire surged into the Red Dragon's brain. He used his remaining reason to cast 2 camouflage spells on himself, then went around the clouds and quietly approached. To Shanmu, our alliance ends here. The agreement is null and void. 2 days later, the Red Dragon Nady Andrea appeared at the headquarters of the Central Allied Army. He said righteously, I suddenly don't want to play with you humans anymore. I have more important things to do. You better send the things you promised to Dragoncry Mountain as soon as possible. That's it, I'm leaving. Without waiting for Tashanmu's reply, Nady, who had turned into a human, strode away. The greedy Red Dragon didn't even try to ask for the reward that Tashanmu had promised. Chapter 522. Taking large strides out of the camp of the Tashanmu army, Na Lai's expression suddenly collapsed, and he shivered. What happened here had better have nothing to do with me. No, I didn't even appear here, he said as he transformed into his dragon form, flapped his wings, and flew away. Back to 2 days ago. As night fell, the Red Dragon had shrunk his body and was hovering at a low altitude. Looking to the north, he could see the army's commander-in-chief, and looking to the south, he could see the soldiers' camp. He was hovering in the middle of the army. Na Lai opened his nose and breathed in the smell of metal and meat that permeated the mountain range. He felt the fire of greed burning fiercely. In the bard's poems, the Red Dragon was always described as a robber, a bandit, a tyrant, and so on. There were also some poems that shaped the real identity of these characters into the Red Dragon in order to show the imagery. In short, among the thousands of races in Iradia, most of the evaluations of the Red Dragon were negative, and that was indeed the case. When Na Lai saw so much potential wealth, he could no longer hold back his desire. Only in the process of enjoying wealth and plundering wealth can I feel alive, the Red Dragon muttered as he began to descend. This army was obviously a well-trained warrior, and there were many of them. Jumping up and shouting, "This is my territory, give me all your treasures," was obviously asking for death. Perhaps other Red Dragons would do that, but Na Lai didn't think he was that stupid. He chose to use another method, sneaking in quietly to rob. The Red Dragon was a professional when it came to robbing, and robbing. He had been a dragon for hundreds of years, from a young dragon to a young dragon. He was already familiar with the way things were. The seemingly strict patrols and surveillance of humans couldn't stop a dragon with ulterior motive. Na Lai easily knocked out a knight who seemed to be the leader, and then kidnapped him. Before he carried out the robbery, he first had to figure out who the victim was. If he was young, Na Lai would definitely say, "I don't care who it is, as long as it's in my hands, it's mine." But now that he had grown up, he understood the importance of seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages. The main reason was that he had robbed a luxurious caravan when he was young. He never thought that the owner of the caravan would be a legendary mage, and that she was actually a descendant of the goddess of magic. As a result, Na Lai was chased around the world by that crazy woman. In the end, he had to pay the price and apologize, spitting a lot of blood before she was willing to let him go. Feline Ranft, Nellie would always remember this name. This incident was the greatest humiliation in his life as a great red dragon. Since then, Nellie had learned his lesson and became much more cautious. Before he made a move, He would always inquire about the owner of the item. He became more like a blue dragon instead of a red dragon. One could imagine how much pain those memories brought to him. A warm, salty wind blew in his face. Wayne slowly opened his eyes. It was dark all around. The back of his head was still hurting, and his body was very weak. It seemed that he had been tortured a lot. He struggled hard but could not move. He felt like a cocoon, firmly trapped in the darkness. What is this place? He remembered that he had just left the leader's tent and lost consciousness halfway through. Wayne was one of the few people in Eladia who didn't have any faith. He didn't believe in gods or devils, but in this pitch-black place that was as dark as a well, he couldn't help but wonder if he had already arrived at the divine kingdom or hell. His soul would be pulled to strengthen the borders of hell, which was what they called the wall. Wayne sneered in his heart. He did not expect that he would die so mysteriously. He did not know if the soldiers who were still alive had helped him catch the murderer. Bright flames illuminated his pupils. 2 eyes as large as copper furnaces appeared in White's vision, carrying with them a burning flame and a choking smell of sulfur. "Dragon," he said bitterly. The floating flames became bigger and bigger, spreading the light to the surroundings. Wayne found himself in a dry cave, and the thing in front of him was fully revealed. A huge, strong red dragon. "Dragon," Wayne repeated. Nail showed an angry expression. He was very dissatisfied with the human's reaction. Normally, the poor human should have jumped up the moment he saw him, screamed in horror, trembled, and knelt down to beg for mercy. In this way, he would be able to obtain great self-satisfaction. He would be satisfied with his own strength and horror. The red dragon liked to show off their strength and the sense of accomplishment brought by their strength. "Kneel down, reptile," Nail roared. He did not feel satisfied, so he decided to use more cruel means to deal with the human in front of him. "Do you know who you are facing?" "Andrea, the Burning King, sing my name." Without waiting for the human to respond, the red dragon continued, "Tell me, where did you come from, where did you go, and why did you break into my territory?" The flames came close to Wayne's face, making the hair on his face curl up and hot. He knelt down as the red dragon said, but only on one knee, as if he was performing a knight's salute. He said, "I offer you the highest respect, the great burning King Andrea. If they knew in advance that the army would pass through your territory, the kings of Ersala would have sent you sincere greetings. This is a misunderstanding, please forgive me." White was very calm. He was born in the kingdom of Io in the Ersala region, and he had personally experienced the Battle of Monet's Recovery, which was called the Return of the Nightmare. He had seen bigger battles than this. A red dragon, to be honest, did not make him panic. He could even clearly tell himself that at this moment, his thoughts were scattered, his heart was racing, and his limbs were numb. All of these were physical reactions caused by the red dragon's power. "Ersala." The red dragon looked down at him, and 2 streams of hot steam came out of his nostrils. "Human from the north, why did you break into this place?" "I'm sorry, Lord Andrea." Wayne showed an apologetic expression. "Forgive me for not being able to tell you. This is a military secret. Although I don't know why you invited me here, I hope you can let me go back to report first, and then come back to have this friendly talk. The disappearance of a knight commander is not a small matter, and the king will start the search as soon as he gets the news. I don't want to deepen the misunderstanding between us. Are you threatening me?" The dragon's scales glowed red, which was a sign that the red dragon was angry. "Knight commander, didn't your king tell you not to threaten a dragon, let alone a powerful red dragon?" "Lord Andrea, this is not a threat," Wayne said sincerely. "I'm just describing what's going to happen next. Every word is the truth." "Reptile, you've angered me." The crimson dragon stood up with its hind legs, its head almost touching the ceiling of the cave. "Your calm demeanor is really annoying. You puny humans, your lives are in someone else's hands, but you're still mumbling nonsense. You don't know what's going on." As he spoke, the angry red dragon grabbed Wayne with his claws and enjoyed the painful expression on Wayne's face under the great force. "Puny reptile, who do you think you are facing? The great red dragon, Nellie Andrea. Do you think I will be afraid of your so-called human kingdom? Do you think I won't dare to step on you like an ant?" Wayne's tears flowed, and his body slowly turned from struggling to twitch. The great force of the red dragon almost broke his bones. He knew very well that evil dragons like Andrea were all murderous, and it was very likely that he would be crushed to death in the next second, especially after being angered and lost his mind. But he still struggled to say, "You don't dare." The great force on his body suddenly relaxed. Nellie threw him to the ground and stared at him with a strange expression. According to the previous performance, the red dragon felt that this human was not an ignorant and stupid egomaniac. He could still say such words at this time. Either he had lost his mind under the power of the dragon, or he was really confident. Nellie wanted to hear it. Wayne on the ground twitched. After a while, he gritted his teeth and squeezed out a name from his mouth. "Tangerine, Tangerine." The red dragon's expression changed from playful to serious. He stared at the human on the ground and said in a hurried and cautious tone, "What did you say? Say it clearly." "Emperor Tangerine." Wayne calmed down for a while and spoke more smoothly. "You should have heard of him. Do you want me to say his real name?" The red dragon's expression changed. After a while, he growled, "Are you trying to scare me with his name? What does he have to do with you?" In silence, Nellie refused Wayne's proposal to say his real name. It was said that Emperor Tangerine was close to God. If he said his real name, he might be able to sense it when they were in the same plane. Wayne said slowly, "Ersala is located in the north. He is the king of the north. We came from the north." Seeing that the red dragon did not speak, he added, "Lord Andrea, some things are really military secrets. I have said it clearly enough. Even if this army is really hired by him, do you think he will care about you little people? Little reptile, you think too highly of yourself." Nellie growled, but it could be seen that the dragon was a little weak. Most of his anger was fake. "Indeed, my death is insignificant. Emperor Tangerine will not care about a little person like me." Wayne nodded. "But the king of Io will. My king will find you because of the disappearance of the Knight Commander, and once you have a conflict with Ursula's alliance, if the alliance is defeated, the Emperor of the North will turn his attention to this place." "Damn reptile," Nellie growled. He felt that he could not just let it go. This human did not give any evidence that Tangerine was related to this matter. If he backed down like this, and this matter spread out in the future, anyone could scare him away with just a name, whether it was true or not. But Nellie did not dare to take the risk. The name Tangerine seemed to contain some kind of magic that made people's hearts tremble. The Dragon King, the Black Emperor, the enemy of the gods, a series of titles were attached to this name. It would be a lie to say that he was not afraid. As an evil dragon, Nellie knew more about the deeds of that guy than the human in front of him. He also knew more about the horror involved. Anyone who was an enemy of the Black Emperor would be cruelly punished, and dragons had more terrible things waiting for them. It was said that dragons who were enemies of the Black Emperor would be taken to a place called the Blood Pool and be baptized by some kind of evil magic by the Black Emperor, Caesar Tangerine. After that, they would still remember everything that had happened before, but they would not be like themselves. They would live for the Black Emperor until death. If the other party was only powerful, it would not scare Nellie away, but this kind of brainwashing similar to that of an evil sorcerer was too terrifying. The Northerners said that the transformed monsters were the descendants of the Black Emperor, and Caesar Tangerine himself also called them the blood of my blood, but in Nellie's view, this was no different from the last descendants of the evil dragon, created by the Dragon Queen, Tiamat. It was even more terrifying. No wonder they fought to the death before. Thinking of this, Nelly could not help but shiver. He glanced at the human who was waiting for his response, and did not say anything. He snorted heavily, flapped his wings, and flew out of the cave, never looking back. Chapter 523. The eye slits of the helmet limited his vision. Lun could only see straight ahead, but when he turned his head, he saw 3 hammer carts leaning against the central square. There was also a catapult that was desperately throwing asphalt stones as cover. Virgil's people filed out of the gap. "Wedge formation," he ordered. The cavalry troops intertwined into spears, and he was the tip of the spear. Everyone rode close to each other, their knees colliding with each other as they moved forward against the high wall. The black and white war flag fluttered in the wind, and the white bear and the black eagle danced together. The troops went around the bottom of the castle and gradually accelerated. Arrows shot out from the city wall, and stones spun and flew above their heads, blindly crashing into the buildings on the ground, shattering steel and flesh. The gate of triumph was right in front of them, and the enemy swarmed in. They pushed a huge iron oak siege hammer with all their strength and rushed towards the cavalry troops. "Prepare the spears," Lun ordered. Facing the siege hammer, he did not slow down at all and began to sprint. The archers with the magic breaker surrounded them. As long as someone appeared on the gate tower, they would immediately aim and shoot. The ground was wet and sticky, full of filth mixed with mud and blood. His horse tripped over a corpse, and its hooves slipped on the mud. It almost jumped out of the formation directly. Fortunately, Lun used his strength to stabilize the horse and maintain the balance between the man and the horse. The enemy under the gate rushed up, roaring, and met the cavalry's attack with flesh and blood. Lun raised his sword and shouted, "Long live Virgil!" The soldiers responded loudly, and the cavalry flew out, letting out a long screech of steel tearing through silk. The rolling horse hooves and the spears and swords collided into fire. The siege hammer was soon forgotten in the mud, and the people around it either fled or fought to the death. Lun rode his horse and knocked down a soldier who held a shield high. He cut off his arm from the shoulder to the armpit, and then cut open his helmet. This sword was a very rare enchanted weapon. Although it was not legendary, it was still very powerful. Lun used it with ease, and wherever the sword went, the shield would shatter, the hand would break, the head would be broken, and the flesh would be separated. Through the padded heavy helmets, painful wails could be heard. The crackling of the flames, the loud war horns, and the roars of the griffins. Blood and fire were everywhere. In the end, the pike cavalry still managed to get past the battering ram, and the enemy began to flee. Lun looked left and right, but he could not see Tashanma's figure. They rode their horses through the scattered corpses, cutting the throats of every enemy lying on the ground. "Well done!" The man rode to Lun's side and hit Lun's chest with his right fist, which was covered with a gauntlet. "This city is ours. It's a pity that we didn't find Tashanmu." Lun tidied up his helmet and chatted with his companions. They led the team through the flickering flames and smoke, passing through the ruins of the residential area and stepping onto the Long Lord's bridge. How could it be so easy? His companion smiled. He was very young, and his black hair was neatly parted. Even though he had just gone through a bloody battle, it was not much messy. He wore a pitch-black armor, and his helmet was surrounded by a ring of sun-like diamonds. The eagle on top of the helmet had ruby eyes, and the female eagle on his shoulders clasped a long and heavy golden cloak, which hung down to cover the horse's buttocks. The horse armor was also gilded, and it was decorated with the eagle coat of arms of the Charlie family. Charles Charlie, the new king of Io. His father was the famous hero Nelson Charlie. During the Return of Nightmares campaign, he led 10,000 people to stop the sudden attack of the Viper Dragon Tide at the Broken Mountain Fortress. He fought until the last 214 people died. After that, the Emperor of the Northern Empire ordered people to pay tribute to him and gave him the title of Eagle King. Charles Charlie was also known as the Son of Eagle. This descendant of the hero was not just a name. After Nelson's death, the heavily damaged Io should have been annexed by other countries in the Arzala region. However, after Charles ascended to the throne, he relied on his strong governance and connections, of course. He also had the protection and support of the Blackwing Empire to quickly save the country from the shadow of a great loss. In the next 5 years, the country's strength flourished day by day, and it vaguely seemed to become the leader of the Arzala region. The one in the north did not give up on Virgil in the end, Lun Joseph whispered. Rune Joseph whispered. The king of Virgil, the hidden necromancer, had a gloomy look in his eyes. No matter who it was, they would be dissatisfied. Rune thought that he had shown enough sincerity. At the beginning of the attack on Coer, Virgil had already cut off their retreat and surrendered to the north. However, the other party had not given a response. It was only when the Virgil people were at the end of their rope and were almost trapped to death by Tashimu that they finally saw the light of hope, the arrival of Ursula's reinforcements. A week ago, Charles led the Arzala army to come under the orders of the Blackwing Empire. Not only did he help Virgil solve the siege of Fort Veer, but he also cleaned up the hostile forces in the city of Coer with Rune Joseph. He also began to launch a counterattack against the Tashimu coalition army. Don't be angry. Charles patted him on the shoulder in a sunny manner. The Black Emperor probably had no intention of going to war with the unfallen empire at the beginning. He should have taken a lot of risks by intervening in the affairs of the central region. Rune Joseph fastened his greatsword and suddenly became silent. After a while, he said, "When can I see him?" "I don't know." Charles smiled. "After all, I've only seen him on the murals. If you must see him, maybe there will be a chance after this war is over." "A war between mortals," Rune said softly with unknown meaning. When the last batch of scouts returned to the castle at dawn, the scholar came to him. "My lord," he said, "we're being defeated." Tashimu stared at the plate of oats, cane sugar, and sausages in front of him in a daze. Another sleepless night had made him sore all over. He was hungry, but when he saw the food, he only felt nauseous. "Enrico hasn't replied yet?" "No." The scholar said, "Those southerners in Branolin Island haven't done anything either. Send someone to invite him again." He punched the plate. "Arzala has already joined the war. The trading city alone can't hold on. Does Enrico want me to surrender?" "You're right." The scholar said, "We should take a defensive position now. The opponent's next target is Mernon. As long as Mernon closes the door and defends, Rune Joseph and his allies will be suppressed, and they will be unable to go any further. If necessary, Mernon's food reserves will be enough to support a year of siege." "There won't be a siege." Tashimu shook his head. "In the first 1 or 2 days, they may camp to make ladders and bind clawhook. But once they find that it's useless, these guys will build a magic circle and force a transmission. Once they succeed, Mernon will be breached in hundreds of places at the same time, just like yesterday." Under the layers of leather, steel, and wool, Tashimu was sweating slightly. "I want wine. Give me a barrel." A fire was lit in the lord's bedroom. He sat by the fireplace and poured a cup of summer wine from the cellar. This wine was produced in the north, which was hostile to him. Tasted surprisingly good. Tashimu had ordered that no one in the city trade with the north, but he had his own business in secret. A reply from the south soon arrived. "The Empire of the Unfallen has agreed to provide assistance. Mons has led a large group of people up the river and headed north." Chapter 524. Northern Region, Black Rock Mountain. At this moment, in the Hellfire Temple at the bottom of the Black Rock Mountain, Asliers was sitting on the ground carelessly, shouting, "Come, let the flames purify everything." The huge dice bounced up and down, producing a series of metallic clanging sounds. "Hit. Attack the opponent directly." The projection of the elegy card danced wildly. It's over. Die worm. Sorry, ice mages will never fall, Caesar said casually. Then ice wall spell card on the chessboard activated. When your hero receives fatal damage, prevent the damage and make them immune for the turn. Everything that happened next was logical. 2 fireballs ended the opponent's life, and Aslier's loss. Is it fun to keep using mages? I thought you would play some new tricks. How boring. Aslier's was angry. Also, there's something wrong with the rules of your game. How can Fireball be effective against the Fire Demon King? It's as ridiculous as petrifying a stone man. I want to be immune to this damage. Caesar ignored him and pulled the molten core into his arms, listening to the crackling sound of the flames. This is just a small game. Of course, the simpler the rules, the better. Thinking too much is limiting. After all, I have to let a guy like you understand how to play. Don't talk nonsense. Let's play another round. Aslier's didn't understand the meaning behind Caesar's words. He took out a molten core that had just been nurtured and mixed with liquid and solid from the dimensional space and put it on the ground. Don't count. I'll leave it with you first. If you lose, you'll deduct it from it. Looks like you're ready for a long battle, Caesar said. You can continue to play, but can you please take back those little guys? I can't stand it if your methods are too clumsy. Have I been discovered? Aslier's muttered, not realizing that he had been caught cheating at all. He rubbed his burning bone claws, and a few elemental spirits slowly crawled out of the huge die. In order to prevent magic manipulation, the dice that Caesar and Aslier's used to play cards were specially made. They were magic-resistant, but they could not withstand Aslier's brute force. He hid elemental spirits in the dice and used them to control the numbers thrown. These fire elemental spirits were very small, only the size of Caesar's fingernail. Their short limbs made them look like burning fireworks from afar. However, their faces were very prominent, and their eyes were very large. They could make rich expressions. These small fire elementals jumped out one after another at Aslier's call. They made squeaking noises as they hopped into the flames behind Aslier's horn and disappeared. These are the dregs of Inferno, the lowest level little flame demons. They are not warriors, they do not have the great nature of upper realm creatures, and they do not have any combat power. Aslier said, "You seem to be very interested. Do you want me to give you 2 to play with?" "Forget it." Caesar waved his claws. "But since we're already so familiar with each other, you don't mind providing me with some information, right? Yesterday, I sensed something bad. I knew you didn't come to me just to play cards." Aslier sighed. "Did you sense it? Speaking of which, at your level, it would be strange if you didn't sense it." He elementalized his lower body and sank half of it into the black rock reef ground of the Inferno Temple. Then, he solemnly constructed his territory and reinforced it again and again. It's normal to feel the tremor of the boundary wall because the passage is being dug. The kings of the upper realm have already located Iradia. They are opening up the path that they came from. Tell me more details. Caesar frowned. It's a long story. Next, let's invite the great scholar Asliers to explain it to you. The Flame Demon King was calm and composed, using flames to outline a pattern out of thin air. We can see the astral world created by Oro as a huge sphere. This huge sphere contains countless small spheres of different shapes. There are bottomless abysses where demons reside, or built by devils, divine kingdoms where gods reside, mountain paradise where metal dragons gather, material planes that nurture mortals, fragmented secondary worlds, dangerous and pure elemental worlds. Countless main planes are filled with galaxies. The galaxies aren't pure nothingness. There are also many huge things floating in them, such as huge rocks and islands, volcanoes that spew ice, black holes that can't be escaped from, and some living creatures. Asriers glanced at Caesar. "I know all this," Caesar said. I'm just helping you review it. These are the basics. If you don't understand it, you won't be able to listen to the great scholar Aslier's lecture. Asliers raised his head with a serious face. This guy's chaotic attribute was acting up, and he was now keen on role-playing. He was now in character. Caesar really couldn't say anything to him. He could only lie flat on the ground and wait for the Flame Demon King to continue his performance. Iradia belongs to the material plane. Material planes are usually stable, the kind of small balls that tightly wrap themselves up. The intersection with the astral plane is almost zero, but this doesn't mean that it doesn't interact with the outside world. For example, where we are now at the Black Rock Mountain, I didn't distort and modify this terrain. The bottom of the desert was originally a bottomless magma river. I just brushed away the sand and dust to make it show its original appearance. Asliers constructed an illusory model of the bottom of the Black Rock Mountain. This river stores trillions of tons of magma. This is common in the elemental plane, but it's rare in the material plane. This kind of special geographical location means that there may be a weak spatial node somewhere. That's indeed the case. The Underdark that we shattered is proof, and I was teleported here from this node with the help of Tiamat's power. Does this have anything to do with the tremors of the world barrier yesterday? Caesar interrupted. It doesn't have much to do with it. If it doesn't, then why did you waste so much of my time? Black Dragon was dumbfounded. The chaotic and evil guys were really weird, and he was actually listening so intently until now. It seemed that staying with Asliers had caused his intelligence to deteriorate. This guy had an intellect-reducing halo. Don't worry, it'll be related in a while. Asliers snorted. If I don't explain clearly, you'll definitely ask me all sorts of questions later. But I didn't ask anything. Even someone as calm as Caesar could not help but want to complain. This guy Asliers probably just wanted to talk. The talkative Balrog King was too lonely in the Black Rock Mountain. It was not easy to meet Black Dragon and Tangerine, who were of similar status and power, who he could communicate with, and who could be considered half a friend. Of course, he would pour out everything he had. All right, let's continue. Asliers obviously knew what Caesar was thinking. The Demon Lord's expression did not change. It's true that I was teleported here, but the bottomless abyss can't possibly allow all the lords of the upper realm to teleport here. Not only Iradia, the nodes in the abyss would not be able to withstand it. If they want to suppress and conquer a world with an army, the lords of the upper realm must build worm-eroded passages. Those things are not easy to get, and the warriors have to dig them one by one with their hands. In the past, those little demons dug the passages aimlessly. If they were lucky, they would be able to dig an exit in 20 or 30 years. If they were unlucky, some demons might not be able to find a plane in their lifetime. Anyway, we'll attack whichever world we dig. There are both successes and failures. So many of you lords of the upper realm will also fail? Caesar made a teasing sound. Most of them succeeded in destroying the world, but there were also cases of failure. There were 2 cases that left a deep impression on me. One time, we dug up the Alliance of Stars. The humans in that place were not strong individually, but they were very rich in weapons. There were lasers, phase disruptors, star destroyers, and other things that I've never heard of before. It was very interesting. Asliers's face showed an expression of reminiscence, and then he shuddered slightly. There was another time we dug into a secondary plane. It was a very inconspicuous place. At first, the upper realm creatures did not pay attention to it, but then we found there Xylan. Demons were not willing to show weakness, but this name seemed to have some kind of magic. It reached out from the shadows and grabbed Asliers's heart. The Lord of the Abyss, the absolute lord of the 601st floor, showed a timid look like a lamb. It was as if the power in his hand had completely lost its effect, and there was no sense of security to speak of. This was a sad past, and Asliers did not want to talk about it anymore. He was not even willing to say the full name of the other party so that Caesar would know. He paused and pulled himself out of the memory. The demons that dig worm-eroded passages are like headless flies, running around without a clue. Moreover, unless the little demons are controlled by magic, it is impossible for them to work together. Even the lords of the upper realm have a hard time ordering them around, so our efficiency in invading other worlds is very low. But this time is different. Asriel's expression turned serious, and he regained the aura of a lord of the abyss. The lords have already located Eladia, and they are currently digging a passage to their destination. As long as this passage is successfully constructed, there will be a blowout, and all the demons will be able to easily reach this material plane through the worm-eroded passage. At this point, Asliers showed Caesar a picture very well. In the picture, a certain material plane was invaded by the demons of the abyss, and all kinds of strange monsters poured out from the black hole in the sky. Although they were suppressed by the rules of the material plane, they still had the ability to tear all material creatures apart. The magnificent cities fell one after another, and turned into burning ruins one after another. In the end, those gods whose faces couldn't be seen clearly appeared together and barely managed to stop the demons from advancing. However, the flames of war were still everywhere and the demons were stuck in a stalemate. That material plane was reduced to a battlefield between the gods and demons. No matter what the outcome was, it was already destroyed. If everything goes well, and the other lords do not have different opinions, we will be able to dig Iradia in 100 or 200 years. There was some joy in Aslier's tone, and this made Caesar finally realize that he was facing a demon lord. The vibration of the world wall you felt before was a warning from Iradia's will. I will not let this happen. Caesar's tone was firm. The reason why I went against the wishes of the Lord of the Dark Cloud and told you these things is because I see you as a friend. Since I see you as a friend, I will not let you die. Asliers said, How are you going to stop it? Not to mention that you are a demigod, even if you are a real god, it will not help. Do you see those weak gods? If the invasion of the abyss could be stopped, they would have done it long ago, and you would not have a chance. The worm-eroded passage's environment is the same as the abyss, and we are the strongest there. Yes. The black dragon nodded in agreement and then said, But maybe 100 years is very short for you, but it is very long for me, too long. It is long enough for me to grow from a baby dragon that has just hatched from an egg to the Lord of the North. After another 100 years, I don't know what Iradia will become, and what I will become. If the invasion of the abyss really appears in Iradia 100 years later, I will stop it, and maybe kill some demon lords while I am at it. With your ability, I believe you can kill a few demon lords in the material plane, but you will not be able to stop the creatures from the upper world from coming. Asliers waved his hand. Well, I did not expect us to end the conversation in such a serious way. Next, I will close the Black Rock Mountain and go into a deep sleep to accumulate power. The next time we meet may be on the battlefield. Anyway, my friend, good luck. Chapter 525. The guys from Aelzala are doing a good job. Caesar crushed the communication crystal in his hand and said to the Black Wings higher-ups who followed him, Virgil has already begun to counterattack. Their commander, Lone Joseph, is a smart guy. He knows very well that the reinforcements are not here to help him defend his position. This lone wolf is tearing Tishanmu apart and setting off a new round of turmoil in the central region. This is very good. Let us have plenty of time to prepare for everything that comes next. Perhaps there are more direct and efficient means. Nero snorted and bared his teeth. You only need. No, you don't need to do anything. The Imperial Court only needs to send the Black Wings and some of the radiation dragons, and the human city-state that relies on trade for a living will tremble and crawl at the feet of the Empire. With your wisdom, It is not suitable for you to comment. Just listen obediently, Nero. Hogg, who was walking beside the demon hound, said, I believe that you are telling the truth, but tell me, how are you going to deal with the Rising Sun City? Don't forget, they are allies of Tishanmu. The Trade Federation is not worth mentioning. The Rising Sun City is the real trouble. Fight, there is only one way. Nero said in a muffled voice, fighting will make our race stronger. We will tear apart all resistance for our king. That's good. This is what a demon hound should say. What do you mean? You're just stupid. Hogg smiled. He was very familiar with Nero. This kind of teasing was not the first or second time, so he knew that the other party would not be angry. Okay. Caesar interrupted their conversation and reached out to touch Nero's head. He looked like he was comforting a kitten. I know you haven't been out for a long time and can't help but grind your teeth. Just wait a little longer. The legendary demon hound with a body size of more than 25 meters was indeed no different from a kitten in front of the black dragon. Caesar led them all the way forward. The surrounding terrain was very high and the slope slowly rose. From a distance, it looked like a hill that suddenly rose from the ground. There were few people around, and even beasts and birds could not be seen. At the end, the road ahead was suddenly cut off, and the noise of the waves entered their ears. This was a precipice near the sea. Looking down, it was about a few hundred meters high. Has the graveyard been completed? Hogg asked. I just found out 2 days ago, so I came over to take a look. As Caesar spoke, he snapped his fingers with his claws. Sparks shot out from his scales, and the clear sound of steel clashing could be heard. This sound seemed to be some kind of signal. The sea breeze became less clear, and it was mixed with another sharp sound. Rip, rip, rip. The sound of the sea breeze gradually faded away, but this sharp sound became more and more obvious, like thousands of pieces of metal scraping against each other underwater. The pitch-black sea suddenly lit up as if it was burning. Gloomy white light seeped out from under the precipice. Then, as if a palace of bones had risen from the sea, the crisscrossing steel and bones weaved into some kind of inexplicable building. It slowly appeared in front of Caesar amidst the rumbling sound. Not all of it, but through the shadows under the sea, at least half of it was still hidden in the deep water. The skeletal dragon Angramo also appeared under the water, bringing with it a strong aura of death. It flapped its skeletal wings and landed beside Caesar. The soul fire in its chest and eye sockets was surging. Father! She was the watcher here. Unbelievable! Hogg sighed. I didn't expect it to really be built. Introduce it. Caesar raised his chin. Yes. Angramo nodded. She organized her words and said, the first product of the Empire's Steel Cemetery project, an alchemical creation led by Lich Ryan and completed by the Army of the Dead. This cemetery is 300 meters wide and 135 meters high. It can be used for long-term operations on the sea and help the Empire establish a maritime security network. It has 200 sets of reaction arrays, which can scan and classify targets under various search and tracking modes, and automatically correct interference and shielding spells. According to Lord Ryan's tests, it can monitor moving targets in the air and sea within a range of 3,000 square kilometers. It's exactly the same as the goal I propose. Caesar could not help but praise. What Black Dragon did not know was that in the distant empire, Emperor Enrico had proposed a similar strategic goal. In order to fight against Blackwing's powerful fleet, he ordered the mages to build a maritime surveillance system. Their method was to cast countless sorcerers' eyes in the sea, and the range of each sorcerer's eye overlapped with the other sorcerer's eyes. There was no blind spot. During wartime, a group of mages would control the sorcerer's eyes. Emperor Enrico proudly called this plan the Omniscient Eye. The initial design inspiration of the Blackwing Empire's Steel Cemetery came from a military weapon called radar in Caesar's previous life. Compared to the omniscient eye of the Empire, the biggest bottleneck of the steel cemetery was automation. After all, there was still a gap between an alchemical and industrial product and a spellcaster's personal control. To carry the task of monitoring, especially when the range of monitoring was so large, the steel cemetery must have a high degree of intelligence. Therefore, the design was very troublesome, and the difficulty was no less than creating a new life. In order to complete the steel cemetery plan, Ryan was almost always missing. He ordered the entire undead army to provide him with spiritual power and labor. He also called in the Red Lotus goblins from the Materials Research Institute, Weapons Laboratory, and other development departments to work through the night. It took him 3 years to finally deliver the finished product to Caesar. Just like what Caesar had said in the beginning, he needed time to prepare for everything that was to come next. The current Blackwing Empire could indeed look down on the Trade Federation. If the Dark Emperor was willing, the Blackwing clan could easily trample all over the Trade Federation. However, Caesar did not view the Trade Federation as his opponent. Instead, he viewed the Empire on the other side of Eladia as his opponent. In order to prepare for the war that would overturn the current situation of Eladia, the Black Dragon needed time to warm up. The chaos in the central continent was the best prelude to that. Due to Blackwing's military assistance to Vaegrs in the central continent, it would lead to the Empire's assembly line arsenal, the Northern Docks, the Imperial Academy, the Dragon Nest incubation pool, and the clan settlements to enter a state of preparation for war at a leisurely pace. When everything was ready, it would be the time when Blackwing and the unfallen Empire truly went to war. Caesar already knew about the ultimate disaster of Iradia. He estimated that in less than 200 years, the abyssal demons would land on this plane. If he did not have enough power in his hands, he might not even be able to protect his lover and children, let alone Blackwing's territory. Therefore, the Black Dragon had to go all out and start a war. He had to integrate all the power in Iradia as quickly as possible, and at the same time, absorb all the achievements of the Dark Dream that he could. On the other hand, it was unknown if Enriel also knew about the prelude of the abyssal invasion. His actions were exactly the same as Caesar's, interfering with the affairs of the Central Lands to warm up the Empire. In the Central Lands of Iradia, Rune Joseph and Tishanmu, the two main characters of the war that divided the Trade Federation, were pushed forward by two invisible hands. They had requested for peace on the grounds that their army had suffered heavy losses, but they were strictly rejected. Chapter 526. Within a few weeks, the situation in the central region had changed drastically. The Vaegrs had received help from Ilsala and launched a fierce offensive, throwing the allied army into chaos. They lost tens of thousands of people, and were forced to withdraw from the Koa region. In order to not lose more territory, Tishanmu had no choice but to ask for help from the south. Main Wanster Fortress. Boom! Scorching shells flew out of the short mortar muzzles. Under the skillful positioning of the dwarven cannoneers, they drew a nearly perfect parabolic trajectory in the air and finally smashed into the Ilsala cavalry charging towards the trenches. The moment the cannonballs hit the ground, the splashing flames and shrapnel that were launched in all directions tore the fragile armor of the cavalry into pieces. After the baptism of artillery fire, the dwarves immediately reloaded their flintlock guns, jumped out of the trench, and poured the bullets onto the battlefield in the crisp sound of gunfire. Although the dwarves had appeared a little late, they were definitely the strength that Tishanmu needed the most right now. After many lobbying requests, Prince Maknae was finally willing to lead his Thunder Blade clan into battle. At the front of the main Wanster fortress, Maknae led the Iron Castle warriors to form the most solid line of defense. They were practically facing Ersila's swarming troops head-on. Like a reef in front of the waves, they stood firm. The knights are firmly blocked outside the fortress. They have a lot of numbers, but as long as we guard these few passes, they won't be able to rush up. In addition, the combination of guns and cannons is very suitable for defending the front line. If we have more equipment, that would be even better. Macne Thunderblade was clad in his own armor and wielding a dark golden war hammer. He led his personal guards through the passageway on the upper level of the fortress. The frontline commander, Yuli Thunderblade, was right behind him, giving him a detailed report on the current situation. There was no joy on the Iron King's face. He stood by the railing with his usual focused and serious posture, looking down at his compatriots who were busy below. The Iron Castle dwarves did not suffer much in the war. After migrating to the Trade Federation, they quickly won the preferential treatment of the city-state. After more than 10 years of rest and development, the Iron Castle's strength was even stronger than before. Although the enemy was numerous, Macne still had the confidence to face the enemy head-on. He just had to be careful. This is just an appetizer. The people of Aisha Sala aren't as weak as they look, or they wouldn't have dared to attack Myrnan. Maybe the attack here is just a diversion, and they're planning something else. But as long as we are here, this fortress is impregnable, Wooly said. Really? Macne declined to comment. The dwarves had been away from the mainland for too long. Many dwarves had not experienced many wars. Their hearts were still stuck in the small land many years ago, competing with the Red Castle's Dark Flame clan and the Grey Castle's Ambitious clan. Yes, the Iron Castle was indeed the strongest of the dwarves in the 3 castles, but this did not mean anything. After leaving the swamp, they would face challenges from all of Iradia. Almost as soon as the two of them finished speaking, Macne's warrior's intuition made him raise his head abruptly. His sharp eyes stared at Ursula's army in the valley in the distance. Between the connected mountains and valleys, a faint red light could be seen. This is, boom! The scorching halo expanded rapidly in their field of vision, enveloping everyone in a sudden burst of blazing light. Wu Lai howled in pain, as if he was suddenly thrown into lava. His body was like a leaf blown by a gust of wind. If not for McNeil grabbing him at the last moment, he would have been flung off the railing. Boom, 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 boom. At this very moment, in the valley far away from Wester Fortress, 30 steel behemoths were making noises non-stop. Steam rose from their heads, and the black barrels of their cannons spewed out flames one after another. The blazing flames lit up the dimly lit valley. Behind the blazing flames was the ferocious face of the north towards Eladia. The people of Ersala brought the steam tanks of the Blackwing Empire to the central region, but they did not understand the meaning of the word tank. So, in Ersala, these terrible things were translated as tangerine tusks, or black tusks. Dressed in heavy black armor, Rune Joseph stood at the front of the formation. He looked at the solid wall of Wester Fortress in the distance that was illuminated by the sunlight. Under the attack of the Black Tusks, the fortress looked like it was being dismembered. Like a landslide, rocks and broken steel fell from the fortress, mixed with the corpses of creatures that had been set ablaze. This cruel and spectacular scene did not cause any waves in the heart of the necromancer. He was only amazed by the power of these terrible weapons. At first, Rune imagined that they were some kind of weapon similar to magic cannons, but that was not the case. These moving steel fortresses attacked unexpectedly fast, unlike the magic cannons that needed a long time to recharge. Also, when Rune Joseph was not paying attention, he secretly checked them and found that the magic reaction of these weapons was frighteningly low. Relying on such minuscule magic power to create such great power would require an extremely high magic energy conversion rate. This meant that the alchemy technology of these weapons was already very advanced, comparable to or even surpassing the current overlord of Eladia, the Unfallen Empire. This was very inconceivable because alchemy technology was different from wealth and military power. Perhaps a country could quickly amass wealth and recruit an army, but it would never be able to achieve great success in alchemy in a short period of time. This was because alchemy technology was like a staircase. Only after climbing the first step could one see the scenery of the second step, and so on. The development of alchemy level required a country to cultivate for a long and deep time. Some countries might have military power on paper, and their development in all aspects was very good, but they could not even make a magic conversion, such as the current Trade Federation. Looking at the leopard through a tube, one could imagine what the Blackwing Empire was like now, but this country was only founded less than 100 years ago. How did it do it? The voice of the Black Tusk's commander pulled him back to reality from his thought. Stop firing, observe the field of vision, correct the trajectory, move forward, and prepare for the second round of bombardment. How is this unit? Charlie came to his side and asked. Elite. Rune gave a positive evaluation. Of course. Charles nodded with a smug look on his face. It's one of the most important troops in the kingdom. I spent a lot of money to build it. Each of these pilots is a royal knight of noble character who was carefully selected. Pilots? You don't think that these weapons don't need people to operate, right? That's terrible. Charles said, when we bought the Black Tusks from the Empire gave us a 1-year training course. Only students who have obtained the pilot qualification of Blackwing can operate these weapons. Oh yes, they will also send a maintenance team, saying something like logistical support. Although the food and accommodation of these guys are taken care of by the royal family, I have to say that the Empire has done this very well. You mean? Rune pondered for a moment and asked, these were all bought from the Blackwing Empire? They sold you this kind of thing? At first, Rune took it for granted that this was the Blackwing Empire's army that had sneaked into Ersala. But now, after listening to Charles, it seemed that this was not the case. These weapons came from Blackwing, but now they were owned by Io. With his worldview and knowledge, of course, it was difficult for him to understand the Blackwing Empire's behavior of selling these things as commodities. It should be known that each of these Black Tusks was a terrible weapon with amazing power. If it were him, he would hide it well as a secret. How could he easily give it to others? Ally Channel, 300,000 gold. Charles stretched out 2 fingers. 1. But they don't sell it alone. They say that this thing must be used in an organization, so they sell it in packs of 10 each time. In addition, both parties have to sign an agreement and pay a deposit of the same amount to ensure that these weapons will not be used against themselves. Then how many did you buy? Rune asked. Here, just these. Charles raised his chin and said, we can't not buy them, because everyone is arming themselves with these weapons. Some countries are so militaristic that they can only buy 50 Black Fangs at most. However, the high-ranking lords and I have calculated for a long time. This is already the limit that Io can support at the moment. Chapter 527. We must take the initiative to attack. In the fortress, Macne Thunderblade was riding on a dwarf horse. When he saw the messenger come to him, he frowned and signed his name on the battle report. Inform Leader Tishanmer that we need his magic assistance. If we don't take the initiative to attack and destroy those iron chariots, they will destroy the fortress directly. Melson, Carrick Bryn, you are all the best leaders of your clans. You have experienced hundreds of battles and are fearless. The Iron King looked at the mages, warriors, and paladins in front of him. He stroked his beard and said in a deep voice, now you know the mission of the dwarves. I want you to stay and lead the reinforcements to Norland's Trail. Go around and cut off the enemy's supplies. I will defeat the enemy and set up a new defense line in the destroyed Creek Valley town. Do not disappoint me. Understood. The 3 dwarven commanders looked at each other. Not long after the Iron King and the Thunderblade clan left the fortress, they waited for Tishanmer's reinforcements, 30 enchanted puppets. Enchanted puppets appeared on the stage of Eladia at the beginning of the Third Era. At the beginning of the design, these golems were only 2 to 3 meters tall. Their combat ability was not outstanding. At that time, they could only carry out some simple orders and perform tasks like guarding and patrolling. However, at that time, these puppets had already shown their great potential in a certain aspect. They were created through the basic principle of changing reality through a wish spell. They could not be regarded as a magical creation, but as an independent item. Because these puppets did not have real life and did not have the physiological characteristics of living creatures, they were naturally immune to many magical effects. The pioneers of the Third Era saw the potential of these puppets and decided to invest in their research. With the development of human civilization and the advancement of alchemy and rune technology, the enchanted puppets were constantly updated and gradually became Iradia's main weapon on the battlefield. Currently, the mainstream magic puppets were already 10 meters in size, and the largest could even be 20 meters in size. They were stable and immune to most spells. Moreover, the creator could insert up to 3 types of spell models to strengthen them to meet the needs of war, such as swift, ferocious, tenacious, and indestructible. By the time the dwarven commanders arrived at the Norland Trail between the Grey Mountain Ridge and the valley, the battle on the other side had already begun. Under the command of Son of Eagle Charles and Marquis Poison Heart Lone Joseph, Ursula's army was gathering at the border of Wanst Fortress like a dark cloud. They were planning the second round of attack on the fortress. This army was huge, and there were still legions coming from the rear. On the other side, the king of the Iron Fortress, Macne, had already led his army out of the fortress. He commanded the dwarven soldiers to charge left and right, while he himself held a short axe in one hand and a heavy hammer in the other. He leaped off his pony and charged forward on foot, like a cold-blooded and precise weapon of war. Every time he attacked, he would completely cut down the enemy in front of him. Macne's attacks were extremely lethal. He held a holy weapon blessed by the gods, and he himself was the god of dwarves, Moradin. Every time he swung his short axe and heavy hammer, electric arcs would spurt out, causing area damage to the enemy, paralyzing and even killing a large number of Ursula's soldiers. In the bloody battle between the dwarves and the humans, the warriors in the front row did not attack according to Macne's request. Instead, they held large enchanted shields and formed a shield formation at the front of the battle line to block the rain of arrows from the enemy. In the rear, the musketeers were wildly firing. These dwarves were very proficient in shooting, and every one of them was a superb sniper. The flintlock muskets, coupled with the barrels of gunpowder that were thrown from time to time, posed a huge problem for Ursula's troops in a short period of time. The turning point appeared 10 minutes later. Charles sensed the dwarves' strategic intentions and decided to stop them, so he activated Tusk again. Rumble, the unique roar of those black steel monsters resounded throughout the battlefield. In the roar of the super-powerful engine and the low roar of the auxiliary magic energy core, the steam tanks quickly rushed to the front line. They did not only have the main cannon as a weapon, but also several continuous fire muskets on both sides of the muzzle. The diverse weapon system made them not only the overlords of mid-range artillery, but also able to explode with great power at close range. The dwarves were still pushing forward with their shields, but even the big shields that were enchanted with magic could not withstand such high-frequency single-point attacks. Cracks soon appeared on the shields covered with magic patterns, and then the whole shield shattered into pieces. The crazily tilted gunpowder bullets formed a shining belt in front of the muzzle, like the sharpest scythe, smashing the giant steel shields and the dwarves' flesh and blood behind the giant shields into pieces. When they reached a designated position, the steam tanks suddenly all stopped, then adjusted their muzzles and pointed at Macne Thunderblade, the king of the Iron Fortress, who was bathed in blood. From the beginning, Macne had been the focus of this war. This guy was too eye-catching and too lethal, so Charles and Lund had to make him the first target. Maknae, who was in the middle of a fierce battle, suddenly felt a great sense of danger. He looked up and saw the black muzzle spewing out flames. These bastards of Ersala actually did not care about the lives of their own people and fired at this chaotic area. "It has to be like this," Lund said in the distance. "If we don't kill him, he'll kill more people." The warriors of Ersala are immortal. Charles looked at the area where the black tusks were aiming at and closed his eyes. This order was given by Lund, but it was acquiesced by him, which made him feel a lot of guilt. The tanks roared, and the loaded bullets left the muzzle at a speed that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye. The bullets were ejected from the large caliber muzzle, and the super-long muzzle gave the steam tanks unparalleled precision. The first and second shells exploded at the predetermined positions, hitting within 1 meter of Maknae, and the third shell accurately hit the dwarf's body. A cloud of smoke formed in an instant, and the huge impact threw all the sand and dust into the air, including broken armor and weapons. But the fourth shell was bounced off, as if it had hit a hard mirror and caused a refraction reaction. The fourth shell changed its angle after hitting the target and exploded in midair. Charles's eyes widened. The first to leave the smoke were the war hammer and the hand axe, their surface floating with a brilliant silver glow, followed by the body emitting the same silver glow. Iron King Maknae reappeared, his body showing a metallic luster. His eyes were filled with rich energy, and his pupils could not be seen. It must be known that in the previous test of the Blackwing Empire, even a strong and healthy adult demon dog would lose all its combat power in an instant if it was hit within the effective range of the steam tank. But Maknae took 4 shells head-on and was unscathed. Holy Spirit State. Lund's pupils widened a little. This guy is a god's chosen. Maknae, who was out of the gunfire, seemed to be very angry. His body was more than 1 size bigger than before. He raised the war hammer surrounded by electric arcs and shouted, "This is a dwarf! Throw!" Boom! The magic-resistant reactive armor on the surface of a steam tank was directly smashed by the small warhammer, and the whole tank was completely deformed. Although it could dissipate the electric arcs and magic effects on the warhammer, it could not resist the power attached to it. This was definitely an attack above the legendary level. Chapter 528. At this time, Maknae seemed to have changed into a different person. He was as majestic as a god, and there seemed to be infinite power radiating from his body in all directions. He stretched out his arms, and the war hammer surrounded by electric arcs automatically returned to his hand. The King of Thunderblades stepped forward and looked up at Ersala's infantry. His breathing was deep and long, and his grayish-brown curly hair was blown back by the wind. Maknae strode forward, exposed to the attack range of the steam tank. His mithril armor was shining, and the sky was still cloudy. Originally, Ersala had chosen to attack at noon, and even if it was a cloudy day, there should be enough light. But at this time, the valley was as gloomy as before dawn, and the wind seemed to carry the low roar of the spirits. Charlie held his long sword uneasily and stared at the dwarf king standing alone in the middle of Ersala's army. Faith and glory. Maknae's voice came from all directions, rumbling with echoes. He raised his war hammer and roared at Ersala's army, "Face the rolling thunder, feel the anger of the god of Moradin." The lightning split the cloudy sky, and the thunder was like a heavy hammer on a huge iron felt, and this iron felt was buckled above the world. The dwarf gods waved their forging hammers and slammed on the dome. The sky was torn apart by the lightning, and a hole appeared in the middle, briefly revealing a brilliance 100 times stronger than the sun. Peepa! A thick lightning bolt fell from the sky and accurately hit a steam tank that was adjusting its shooting angle. Electric arcs flowed on the magic reactive armor, making the surface of the steel-black iron beast flash with mottled brilliance. The tank made a sound of gears churning, and then it became still, It was not completely damaged. When the steam tank plan was proposed, the design of the defense system was the most important, but the developers, the Red Lotus Goblins, neglected one point, which was the protection of the mortal drivers. In the design of the steam tank, the drivers were orcs and goblins. After being hit by the thunder, the main parts of the tank were well protected, but the electric arcs penetrated the insulation layer and penetrated into the cockpit. Even if it was only a little, it was enough to mince the lives of these ordinary people. Without a controller, no matter how powerful a weapon was, it was just an inanimate object. Makni knew this very well. As a warrior, the Dwarf King cast a forbidden spell. Lightning bolts fell from the cloudy sky one after another, hitting the strategic weapon steam tanks of Ursula's army one after another, killing the drivers one after another, causing the Black Tusk army to lose their ability to move and stop firing. At the same time, another dwarven unit that had circled to the flank rushed into the battlefield with the golems. For the Thunderblade clan. For the Trade Federation. This is our territory. Get out. The Dwarf King's miraculous performance had completely turned the tide of the battle, raising the morale of his own side to the highest point. The dwarves blew the horn for a counterattack, and the garrison of Wester Fortress poured out in full force. Griffins and hippogriffons descended from the sky, and crossbows and lances were shot out. The golems and puppets took large strides to open up a path. The enemy was retreating. Ursula's battle line was constantly moving back. Makni realized that the enemy was retreating. They had won this battle. What's the point? Whispers rang out on the battlefield. I heard you. Come out. Makni shouted. Rune Joseph, your cheap spells can't disturb a dwarf. If you still have the courage, come out and face me. You won. So what? Rune Joseph's voice echoed on the battlefield. The outcome of a local battle can't decide anything. If you are determined to resist to the end, all of you will die in the end. You're just stalling for time so that your soldiers can retreat. Makni cut down an Ursula knight. We won and we will continue to win. Tell the northerners behind you that if they still want to set foot in the central region, the dwarves will let them taste the taste of a hammer. The army was gradually retreating, but Rune's voice still rang out. He was not stalling for time. He really wanted to communicate with the Dwarf King. Thunder Lord Makni, I admit that you are the strongest in the central region. You have the power to turn the tide of the battle. Makni said, but so what? Compared to the Black Emperor, you are just an ordinary person. His power compared to yours is like a drop of water compared to the sea. Your meaningless struggle now is futile. When the tide of black wings in the distance surges to the other side, your clan, your allies, and even the gods behind you will be powerless. Makni seemed to be a little tired from the previous battle. He randomly found an enemy's corpse and sat on the knight's armor, panting slightly. After hearing Rune's words, he sneered. Is that so? Then according to what you said, Iradia won't have any more battles in the future. Everyone will sit down and arm wrestle to compare strength, and then the weaker side will surrender directly. Is that what you mean? Rune was silent. He did not know what the dwarf wanted to say. Idiot. Makni suddenly scolded in the dwarf's language. Then his tone changed. Listen, human, it's not like that. All the stories in this world are about the weak fighting the strong, not the strong bullying the weak. That's why heroes appear and epics are born. Maybe you will bend your knees in front of a dragon, but dwarves won't. Dwarves only have battle axes and hammers. When the Swamp Alliance fell apart, the kings of the 3 castles went to different places. Prince Marin of the Red Castle led the Storm clan to the Unfalling Empire, while Prince Adas and the ambitious clan of the Grey Castle went to the north. They received preferential treatment. Rune tried to persuade the gods chosen. Your compatriots are there. Black Wings is not a tyrannical dragon territory, but a kingdom with many followers. Makni, join us. Just like Prince Ada's, you can also feel the goodwill of the Black Emperor. You came with war, spread the plague to every race, and let the flames of war burn every corner. If this is the goodwill you speak of, I think I do feel it. Macne sneered. His breath became even, and he gradually recovered from the previous consumption. You don't understand at all why Emperor Caesar did all this. Before Rune spoke, Charles couldn't help but interrupt with a slightly agitated tone. You don't know what this world will face hundreds of years later. The war of unification is imperative. You don't understand. Macne interrupted him with a louder voice and an angrier posture. This is our home, our wives, our children, and everything we cherish is behind us. No matter what reason you have, as long as you enter this land, the Thunderblade dwarves will stand here with weapons in hand, because we are protecting everything we have. Let the King of the Black Wings come. We will build the high walls of the fortress with our own bodies. We will never retreat until death. Chapter 529. You said Arsala lost? Caesar wagged his tail and slumped on the iron chair in boredom. Odin and Luna were a bit too much. They had been in the elven forest for so long, but they didn't miss home at all. He was considering if he should also go there and catch the two little guys. Hogg considered his words carefully and said, The allied army of Arsala and Virgil suffered a setback at the Wester fortress in Mernon. They encountered the dwarves of the Thunderblade clan. Macne Thunderblade is the god of the dwarves, Moradin. According to his performance on the battlefield of Wester, the Central Intelligence Department has analyzed his combat ability to be above the legendary level. He has the ability to turn the situation around by himself. This is the strongest warrior in the central battlefield that we have recorded so far, Hogg concluded. There are also warriors among our enemies. Caesar nodded. For the allied army of Arsala and Virgil, the Thunderblade clan is indeed a big problem because there is no one in the allied army who can compete with Macne. In the war simulation, we found that if we can't execute the plan to behead the Thunderlord, the Trade Federation will launch a round of counterattacks under the lead of the dwarves. Without more help, Virgil will only be defeated step by step. After that, Hogg tentatively suggested, Your Majesty, should we send the ambitious clan to the central region to provide support? They are very familiar with the Thunderblade clan, and I believe that Prince Adas has the means to deal with Macne. How sinister, Hogg. Do you like to see this kind of drama where former compatriots turn against each other? They are enemies, Hogg said indifferently. They were already enemies when the Swamp Alliance split up. Well, the ambitious clan has been doing their duty in the Empire. Until now, they have been continuously forging molten iron for the country. They are a member of the Empire. If they are sent to the central region, not only will it affect the current ecology of the ambitious dwarves, but it will also shake their loyalty. Not to mention that the ambitious clan is not good at fighting. Caesar rejected the proposal. The black dragon gently rubbed his claws. The Empire has many excellent weapons, but there is no need to expose them to the south because of a Thunderblade dwarf. Macne Thunderblade, I heard some of his remarks on the battlefield. Interesting. I think I already have a suitable candidate. It was a beautiful night in the Dragoncry Mountains. Nellie Andrea was casually lying in the hall. Several vents in the cave were open, allowing the hot air in the night to drift in. Magma was churning in the huge crevice. From his luxurious lair in the Nargli volcano in the Dragoncry Mountains, he could hear all kinds of sounds from the outside world. Nellie Andrea was lying on the hot ground, shaking his tail that was immersed in the magma, dreaming about ruling and conquering. Usually, this would be his most relaxed moment, but tonight, Nellie could not find this feeling. The red dragon's senses were gradually dulled with the increasing sleepiness, but the waves in his heart were getting more and more intense. Nellie suddenly shook his head and got up from the ground. His hard eyebrows were tightly knitted together. He walked around the hot hall, analyzing the current situation over and over in his mind. These behaviors were unusual for evil dragons, especially for the red dragon. Although using the word stupid to describe the red dragon was a bit of an exaggeration, they were definitely not smart. These careless fellows could not maintain long thinking, and it was even more difficult for them to focus on one thing for a long time. This made them closer to beasts than intelligent creatures. In Iradia, the evaluation of the red dragon by the various races was at two extremes. The red dragon was worshipped for their strength, and despised for their intelligence. Because it was difficult to maintain focus and not good at thinking, the red dragon did not seem to care about any danger or threat. Therefore, there were often situations where the red dragon would eat until they were fat and drunk, and then be killed by adventurers. Of course, if it were not for these well-known weaknesses, the rule of the Pentashade dragons in the First Era would not have been so easily ended by the orcs and humans. But today, Nellie's situation was very abnormal. This robust red dragon let out a low panting sound. He climbed to the entrance of the cave, squatted on the top of the volcano, and looked down. After a while, he swung his tail and went into the depths of the lair. He was idle and restless. Not long ago, he was still recklessly squandering violence in the Central, living in the eyes of the mortals. Tishamar of the Trade Federation offered him treasures and slaves to ask him to fight, and the red dragon's powerful strength did not disappoint. Halfway through, he even received an unexpected surprise. Everything was so smooth, but then, the army of Ersala from the north entered the Central. Nellie's nostrils flapped, breathing out a sulfur-smelling gas. Because he could not control his desire for plunder, he took the initiative to attack the army and kidnapped a commander. Since then, a silent shadow shrouded him. Although the red dragon wisely let the commander go and cut off the cooperation with the Trade Federation, the shadow still hung over his head, lingering. Nellie felt a sense of danger. This was not a baseless self-threat, but a warning that really existed. As powerful creatures second only to the legendary races, true dragons had intuition and premonition that mortals could not understand and describe, and the red dragon was even more so. For mortals, the dragons were the true prophets. Most red dragon did not care about these things that they were born with, but if they were willing to capture, explore, they would know how important intuition and premonition were. Nellie happened to be one of the red dragon who knew how to make good use of his talent. He believed that these feelings of danger were not aimless, and that something was really going to happen to him. Nellie turned around and glanced at his beloved luxurious lair. Here, he stored his beloved things that he had collected for hundreds of years, including all kinds of handicrafts, magic artifacts, and ancient relics, as well as a mountain of gold coins. But now, he thought, it was time to pay the price. Nellie Andrea propped up his upper body, trying to appear more sincere. He said in a low voice, "Great Mother Tiamat, your loyal and devout believer, descendant, Red Dragon Nellie Andrea prays to you. I desire to obtain your divine enlightenment. For this, I am willing to give you all the wealth that I have accumulated in my life." Speaking up to here, Nellie suddenly stopped. He was thinking, was Tiamat's divine enlightenment and guidance worth all his wealth? Obviously not. It was better to just let him die than to take all his wealth. Then half? And too much. 1/10? That was still too much. A small piece of guidance was nothing to the Dragon Queen, so it was not worth that much. The Red Dragon thought for a while, tidied up his appearance, and spoke again. "Great Mother, your Majesty Tiamat, your loyal and pious believer and descendant, Nellie Andrea, prays to you, and longs for your enlightenment to guide me. For this, I am willing to offer you 1,000 gold coins as a tribute." 1,000 gold coins, Nellie squeezed out through gritted teeth. He grabbed a handful of gold coins from the pile of treasures and raised them high into the air. His wounded heart was bleeding. There was no reaction from the entire dragon lair. Nelly paused for a moment before heaving a sigh of relief. He stuffed the precious gold coins back into his pile of treasures. He didn't have much hope in the first place, and praying was just a simple attempt. The Red Dragon tribe had never been faithful enough to the Dragon Queen. Compared to Tiamat, they were more respectful toward Kuan-gu-dios. Nelly waved his tail and used some concealment techniques to conceal his pile of treasures. Seeing as praying to Dragon Queen Tiamat was not an option, he had to find another way to avoid danger. For example, digging a hole in the ground and sleeping for a few hundred years was not a bad idea. A crack was suddenly torn in the void. Nalai subconsciously moved in front of the treasure that was still not safe even though it was covered by magic. He then lowered his head and said in a respectful and pious tone, "Your Majesty Tiamat." Only after speaking did he realize that there was no divine power, so it was not Tiamat who had appeared. Chapter 530. Nady Andrea's lair was collapsing. As the lair of a red dragon in his prime, this place was protected by layers of enchantments. It could resist small-scale magic and physical attacks, but it could not prevent the collapse of the red dragon's lair. Caesar poked his body out of the spatial crack, and his huge body pierced through the lair of the red dragon. The haze and uneasiness in Nady's heart had finally been confirmed. It turned out that ever since he appeared in front of Ursula's army, he had been recorded. And now, the Black Emperor of the North had appeared in front of him personally. Nady felt a tremor that extended from his spine to his skull. His heart raced, and his mind was filled with thoughts of impending doom. Facing the Black Emperor of the Iradia, the Red Dragon's first thought was to escape, but his limbs seemed to be less agile. His wings trembled slightly, but they did not flap, as if a powerful spell had been cast on him. But in fact, Caesar did nothing but stare at him. There was no doubt that this guy was the typical red dragon of the Iradia. His horns were prominent, his scales were bright, and he was huge and strong. He had the largest head and the strongest muscles among the 5 colored dragons, and a relatively short neck. His characteristic of leaning towards close combat made his fangs and teeth even more prominent, and his whole body emitted a choking smell of sulfur. It was worth mentioning that in the records of the Black Wing Empire, Nady was a red dragon in his prime, but his body was already more than 30 meters tall. Even among the red dragons, he was one of the most talented. Of course, in front of Caesar, the 30-meter-tall red dragon could only be considered a small guy. The Black Emperor did not speak. Nady was being sized up by him, but he did not dare to ask anything. He could only cower and avoid the Black Emperor's gaze. He uneasily moved his hind claws, leaving gullies on the ground. After a while, Caesar said, "Nady Andrea, a 372-year-old red dragon in his prime. Nice to meet you." "I'm not happy at all," Neville said in his heart. He forced a smile and said, "I salute you, the great Dragon King, the Black Emperor, your Majesty Tangerine. The Red Dragon probably doesn't like long-winded pleasantries, so I'll get straight to the point. To be honest, I've encountered some small problems recently. Something is hindering the implementation of my plan, so I thought of you." Caesar said, "I have carefully investigated your information. There is no doubt that you are a powerful, ferocious, and feared red dragon. Unfortunately, your reputation does not match your strength. Before this, you have made many efforts to expand your influence and reputation, but the results have been minimal. I think you just lack an opportunity." "What opportunity?" To be honest, Nalai was not very interested in Caesar's words, but he had to answer this question. "The opportunity to seize power and power," Caesar said. He raised his head and looked around. He stretched out his claws and pushed the collapsed gravel aside. "You have no relatives or servants. So you are a lone dragon?" "Neville, I remember that many years ago, there was a very famous lone dragon in the Red Dragon, Queen Uxia. But she was finally slaughtered by humans, skinned and scaled, and her skull was hung on the tower for those heroes to show off. Do you want to learn from her? Nalai's eyes moved, but he did not make a sound. It seems that you don't want to, Caesar said. Let me guess. It's not that you don't want to be a real lord, but you were born in Hegian, where the resources have long been divided up by humans. You can't establish your own power. Dragon Cry Mountain, this place seems to be your territory, but you can't exercise dominance over it. On any of Iradia's maps, Dragon Cry Mountain does not have the name of Nadiandria. Power and power. What do you plan to give me, and what do I have to pay? Nalai took the bait. Power and power, status, and wealth were the supreme desires engraved in the depths of the Pentashade dragon's blood. For most Pentashade dragons, as long as these desires could be satisfied, even selling their souls and bodies to make a deal with the devil was not a problem. Forget about your Tiamat. Join the Black Wing Legion and fight for the Empire. Pay is pay. As long as your performance is outstanding enough, you will have the opportunity to fight for a place in the Empire and obtain the opportunity to rule the entire Central Region. The entire Central Region. The Northern Empire is preparing to take this place for themselves? Caesar shook his head. Nalai, if you are well informed, you should know that Iradia will usher in a catastrophe in 200 years. Not only the Central Region, but even the unfallen empire in the south will be swallowed by the Black Wing Legion. Because only a complete and unified Iradia can resist the invasion of the Abyss demons. The Black Dragon said in a gentle tone, When I climb to the throne of the world and defeat the Abyss demons, everyone who has helped me will share the wealth of this world with me. Do you want to join? Nalai Andrea. It's truly a long journey. The Red Dragon's thoughts seemed to have drifted to 100 years in the future. He paused for a while before coming back to his senses. What should I do? Caesar smiled. The allied forces of Ersala and Virgil have been obstructed on the battlefield of Maze N. Macne Thunderblade, a legendary dwarf warrior, that is your target. Nalai showed a puzzled expression. With my current ability, I can't kill a legendary dwarf. Of course, so I will not be stingy with giving you some help. This will also be your first reward. Caesar stretched out his claw and gently touched the Red Dragon's forehead. Before he could block or even turn his head, the Black Dragon's big claw directly hit Nalai's head. He felt an intense pain coming from his skull, as if a powerful spear was piercing his scales. His eardrums swelled, and there was a loud rumbling sound. His limbs were sore, his wings were weak and drooping down, and his tail was curled into a ball. It's just a small sequela, it will be fine soon. At this time, Caesar had already retracted his claw. What did you do? Nalai asked. He felt that his mind was still clear, and he was not contaminated like the legendary radiation dragons, but his limbs were numb and his joints were weak. Don't worry, if I wanted to turn you into a radiation puppet, I would have done so from the beginning. I wouldn't have wasted time and breath on you. Caesar glanced at the Red Dragon. This is psionic enhancement. I left a psionic seed in your body. Awaken it at the critical moment and you will get a huge improvement. It can help you deal with Macne. Under the Black Dragon's terrifying appearance, many people forgot that Caesar was not only the powerful king of the Black Wings, but also a highly accomplished psionic master. When this kind of mental energy was developed to the extreme, it could produce many effects that were comparable to or even surpassing magic. Psionic enhancement was one of them. After the psionic seed was awakened and activated, the receiver would obtain thinking activity, nerve reaction, strength, and tolerance that far exceeded the past in a short period of time. However, there would be some damage to the receiver afterward. This was something that Caesar did not mention. The reason why he chose Nalai Andrea, other than this guy being a dragon and being favored by Caesar, was another reason. In the background investigation of this Red Dragon, The Black Wing Empire found that this guy had a rather unpleasant past with the descendant of the goddess of magic, Feline Ranf. In the end, Nalai apologized, but Feline Ranf still threatened to beat this red dragon up every time she saw him. Nalai, who was active in the central battlefield, might be able to lure that crazy woman out. And the descendant of the goddess of magic was the target of Caesar and Lord of Storms Talos. Chapter 531. I Refuse. Macne placed his hand on the table, poured a mouthful of wine into his mouth, wiped his mouth, and blew his beard. Not all attacks were initiated by Virgil. I don't see any signs of the Federation working hard to seek peace. I think what you should do next is to avoid war as much as possible and negotiate peace with the other party. If it was possible, the head of state would have done that long ago. General, there is no peace in this war of life and death. The senior Federation official sitting opposite him sighed and said, if you want to talk about who is responsible for this, it would be Rune Joseph. He surrendered to Ersala and let foreign enemies interfere with the central continent's affairs. These pests not only plague the north, but also want to climb into our land and territory. They want to enter the central continent and conquer the Trade Federation. His voice gradually became louder. The threat of Virgil has existed for too long. Now that we have the advantage, we must eradicate them without mercy. General Macne, you have the wrong idea in your heart, thinking that tolerance and peace can make both sides reconcile, but that is no longer possible. We must seriously deal with the damage that Rune Joseph has brought to the central continent. Ersala has eaten away our resources, tarnished our land, and weakened us through various means. Our fate is not to beg for peace with them. This land belongs to us, and Rune Joseph and the people behind him have no right to possess it. In the end, the Federation official gave a conclusion, which was also the order of head of state to Shanmur. After recovering the lost land of Fanon, we must pursue the victory and attack Kor. Eliminate all enemies, remove all obstacles, and expel Ersala. Forgive me for being blunt, but I don't think you have the ability to drive the enemy out. Macne's expression was calm, and he did not become hot-blooded because of this encouragement. He was very calm, and his performance on the battlefield was completely different. Other than Ersala, Rune Joseph has even more supporters behind him. Using war as a solution to suppress them will only lead to a more powerful backlash. The Federation official's expression changed slightly. The Trade Federation will face pressure from the entire North. This is known to all, but we also have our own allies and reinforcements. General Macne, this is not something you should consider. Your order is to lead the Thunderblade clan into Kor. Macne stared at the Federation official. My soldiers suffered heavy losses in the last battle, and a large number of wounded people are waiting for treatment. At the same time, we also need meat, fruits, vegetables, and weapons. After all the requirements are met, I think the Thunderblade clan will be able to participate in the next war. A reasonable request. The official nodded. But now the situation is dangerous and the war is urgent. So the Federation's current situation, and the Federation is trying his best to collect resources from all sides. Sir, I believe that when your troops enter Kor, the demands of the Thunderblade clan will be met. In other words, we won't be able to get supplies from the Federation before we conquer Kol? Macne raised his eyebrows. Then, please forgive me for refusing the battle order. The Thunderblade clan can't afford more without replenishment. General Macne. The Federation official's tone became stiff. He was about to lose his patience. Please don't forget that when you migrated to the Central Region, the Trade Federation warmly and kindly accepted you. They did not discriminate because of your race and gave the Thunderblade clan the greatest preferential treatment. Now we need the strength of the dwarves. No one is willing to see their efforts go to waste. You must know that even during times of war, Leader Tishanmer did not forget to give your people the strictest protection. They are still living freely in SWO Harbor, bathing in the best sunlight of the central continent. Maknae raised his eyebrows. This was not a consolation, but a blatant threat. SWO Harbor was the settlement of the Thunderblade clan. When Maknae led his soldiers to rescue Fan En, only the elderly and children were left there. Tishanmu still had troops stationed there. Thunderlord clenched his fists. His eyes were bursting with anger as if he would burst out in the next second and break the bones of this human. But in the end, he chose to endure. The powerful dwarf prince was discouraged. His expression was gloomy and he replied, "Understood. I will lead the Thunderblade clan to attack Kour." The official left, satisfied. At this moment, Maknae suddenly regretted leaving the swamp. If his attitude had been gentler, he would have taken into account the feelings and demands of the other clans. If he had paid more attention to communication, the situation of the dwarves might have been completely different. The swamp alliance had fallen apart. He wondered if the two princes, Artus Lofty and Marin Blazingstar, had ever felt the same way. Not long after, detailed instructions were sent over. Maknae was deeply disgusted with what he was about to do. For a long time, the dwarves had fought for justice, protection, and faith. But this time, he was being coerced. If he refused, the Confederation would harm the Thunderblade clan's people in SWO Harbor. Maknae crumpled the letter into a ball and made a gloomy expression at Harquin Thunderblade. "Let us be prepared," he said. "At least, we are still fighting for ourselves. We are fighting to expel the enemy." Following this order, which he did not like, Maknae gathered his clan's warriors, dwarven knights, and musketeers and approached the border of Kour as quietly as possible. They marched silently according to the instructions, with only the occasional creaking of armor and the stomping of the ponies. When they arrived at the border, Maknae was surprised that the Vaegar's army in Kour had not noticed at all. He had sent out several scouts to make sure that Vaegar's and Ilsala were caught off guard by the attack. The scouts reported that there were only a few people on duty at this time. The musketeers carefully boarded the observation platform to act as distant observation posts. Dwarves could see better in the dark than humans, and Vaegar's soldiers always foolishly lit campfires. "Chief, judging from the number of campfires, the number of soldiers is not more than usual," a scout said in a low voice. "They did not expect us to attack so soon." Maknae raised his arm to make sure that everyone could see, and then waited quietly. His heart was pounding, and the great power of Moradin, the god of dwarves, slowly condensed on his body. 3, 2, 1. Then there was a blood-chilling roar. Maknae suddenly swung his arm down, and was the first to rush out with his heavy hammer and battle-axe. In the dark, there was the sound of weapons clashing, the shouts of humans resisting stubbornly, and the heavy sound of crossbows and muskets hitting the target. The Vaegar soldiers were completely caught off guard. The Thunderblade dwarves roared and rushed into the battlefield like a flood. A foolish soldier rushed towards Maknae himself, shouting, "For Vaegars." His simple military longsword was broken by Maknae's battle hammer. The broken sword fragments flew high, shining in the faint light of the fire, and then disappeared into the darkness. Maknae swung his battle hammer again, and the soldier's mail armor could not withstand the blunt weapon's blow. Under the huge force of the blow, his whole body flew out far away. After a short pause, the roar of victory echoed in the night sky. Maknae looked around. The battle had only started for a moment, and they had won easily and captured Vaegar's outpost camp. "For this battle, this is a good sign," Harquin Thunderblade said. Maknae shook his head. "That is if no one escapes. Under the cover of the night, they can escape to the castles of Kour to report, so we'd better go to the castles in the north immediately and capture as much land as possible before the enemy can react." Chapter 532. Tonight, it was Dirty Eagle Ollie's turn to be on duty at Sergeant Fico's camp. The camp was located at the edge of a mysterious overgrown oasis, and the forest seemed to have sprung up overnight. Even though the veteran liked to drink a glass of wine every half an hour, he was very serious about his assigned duties. He had not touched a drop of wine since nightfall, and now it was almost dawn. He patted his large-caliber flintlock. He liked this weapon. After all, it was an imported product from the north. Its power was astonishing and its accuracy was amazing. Just one shot was enough to take the life of a fiery Maine bear. This was a symbol of honor. It was an extravagant wish for those inexperienced recruits to even touch it. Ollie sighed softly. Soon, his duty would be over, and he would be able to open a bottle of cherry wine, drink 2 mouthfuls, and have a good night's sleep. Rustling sounds came from the bushes, and the veteran's various expressions disappeared in an instant. Then, he jumped up at a speed that most people would not be able to reach. In the no-man's land of Koer, they could be attacked by all kinds of strange creatures, such as velociraptors, mutated birds, evil races, and those annoying things that looked like big flowers or tree demons. A soldier stumbled forward. His clothes were in a mess, and the badge on his chest was embroidered with a white bear hugging a tree. He looked at Ollie in a sorry state and then fell down. Ollie didn't even have the time to catch his body. Nose! Ollie called out to his companion. We're in trouble. A few seconds later, all the guards on duty arrived at the scene. A veteran soldier began to bandage the brave scout's wounds, but Ollie sadly realized that the young man would not be able to recover. Sergeant Tilly's camp was not qualified to have a priest. When Ollie leaned over, the scout eagerly reached out his hand and grabbed Ollie's arm. Dwarf, dwarf, the scout said in a hoarse voice. Attack the border camp, east. I'm not a deserter. His eyes were open, and his stiff body fell to the ground. His brown hair was stained with blood. You're not a deserter. You've delivered the news. Well done, warrior. Ollie clumsily patted his shoulder. Now rest well. He was hit in the back with an axe. The veteran soldier who was bandaging the scout's wounds said, so ruthless. He lost so much blood. It's hard to imagine how this Vagers got here. The dwarves are coming again, said Ollie. May the glory of Azara protect us. A minute later, 2 ravens were released from the camp of Fico's expeditionary army. At the same time, in order to prevent any accidents, Blake, who was the fastest among them and had the best stamina, ran towards the castle in the north as fast as he could with his strong and long legs. At the same time, he prayed to the gods that he could make it in time. The others were also packing up and preparing to head out to inform the various camps. From late at night until dawn, the dwarves kept moving east, far away from the frontline command post of Vagers. Other than taking the initiative to attack the 3 outpost camps that they had to pass through, they had not encountered any resistance so far. As they passed through the overgrown oasis, they found the ruins of a camp. The campfire had been extinguished, but the charcoal was still warm, and there was not much dust on it. The dwarves could not tell who had been stationed here before, because in the no-man's land of Koer, there were often rebels and bandits, and some of the evil races who had migrated far away would also set up camp here. It was not until they found some broken crossbows in the camp that they judged that this was the outpost of an army. Macnay wondered if their actions were still unknown. As time passed, the Rift Valley appeared on their left, and the winding road led them into gently rolling hills. It seemed that they were lucky. After crossing the hills, their military target was in front of them, the castle in the north. Macnay looked at the sky, and the long night was near, and dawn was about to arrive, so he ordered them to stop moving forward. Let's rest for a while. Brothers of the clan, calm down and pray to your gods, so that we can prepare ourselves for the battle, and let our souls welcome the possible death. After a long night's journey, the dwarves would be tired no matter how strong their bodies were. They needed to rest for a while, and then they would launch the attack at the end of the journey. General Duncan Alley, the head knight of the Expeditionary Army, woke up before dawn as usual. He quickly got out of bed, splashed water on his face, and rinsed his mouth. After that, he put on his clothes and began to trim his beard and lip. It was rare for him to care about his appearance, and Duncan saw that there were many bruises under his eyes from the mirror. In the past few weeks, the Expeditionary Army was not doing well, and they were forced to give up the land of Murnan and return to the Coer War zone. The Confederation Army was reorganizing the defeated soldiers, and some small-scale battles had already broken out at the border between Murnan and Coer. There was news that the enemy was talking nonsense, saying things like, "The fate of the invaders is coming and everyone will die here." It seems that the victory of the dwarves has restored their confidence, Duncan thought. And having a sausage for breakfast with strong tea, he set out on his usual patrol route. Although it was still early, the messenger still noticed him and greeted him with a fist salute. Duncan nodded, and the two went up the watchtower together. Dawn had arrived, and the forest and the hills were dyed pink and dark red by the morning light. The clouds in the sky were also painted with golden edges. "Today will be a good day," the messenger said. "I hope so," Duncan said. "Was there anything unusual last night?" "I didn't see any signal or raven," the messenger said. "It was very quiet last night, and everyone was sleeping soundly. But in the middle of the night, a patrol soldier was caught drinking at night and was sent to the court. The night was long, and I often drink to refresh myself. The judge should punish him to sweep the stable." Duncan smiled, and then suddenly narrowed his eyes. "Is that a raven?" The messenger followed his gaze, and his face became dignified. "Yes. Although ravens were quite obedient messengers, no one would like them now, because in times of war, these little black guys often carried bad news. When they appeared, it meant that something had happened." The messenger blew the whistle and reached out to summon the raven. He took off the parchment and handed it to Duncan Alley without opening it. "Bad news," Duncan said as he read. "Scouts report that Macnay Thunderblade led the dwarves to attack the border camp of Virgil. They are coming east, and I have reason to suspect that the castle in the north is their next target." After that, he handed the parchment to the messenger, and when the messenger carefully inspected it, he said, "Tashamur is eager to recover the lost land, and wants to use the power of the Thunderblade clan to further frustrate the opponent. If it were me, I would do the same. After all, we have the advantage. If there is enough time, the Expeditionary Army will find a way to deal with the dwarf sooner or later." "What should we do?" The messenger looked up. "Send a message to inform the commanders of the Expeditionary Army," Duncan said as he quickly left the watchtower and ordered the guards waiting under the tower. "The castle in the north is in a state of war. Let the soldiers prepare for battle and send out all the scouts. In addition, send a team of elite warriors to guard the square and be sure to keep the transmission array unblocked. We are going to give those little guys a hard time here." In order to ensure victory, a lot of preparation work needed to be done in an orderly manner. The castle in the north woke up quickly at dawn, and the soldiers were busy checking the city's defenses to ensure that every artillery and crossbow was in good condition. Spellcasters ran back and forth between the mage towers, and the light they emitted formed an elemental curtain. Chapter 533. They formed an arc at the intersection, where the view was broad. Macnay could see the gray and white marble of the northern castle, with the flag of the Azhara Alliance hanging on it. The castle was very quiet, shrouded in a layer of golden light under the rising sun, like the residence of a princess in a fairy tale. It could be seen that it had not yet awakened, and the Azhara Alliance stationed in the northern castle was unprepared. Macnay raised his hand and ordered the army to get ready to charge at the castle. Bang! The tranquility of the barren land was suddenly broken by gunfire. Sparks burst out from the watchtower of the castle, followed by the drum-like firing sound. Dense bullets poured down from the top, killing a team of dwarves who were sneaking around in a roundabout way. Damn it, they know! The dwarves of the Thunderblade clan immediately reacted, using their own guns, bows, and throwing axes to fight back at the soldiers on the watchtower. Maknae could only feel a surge of anger. He should have expected this situation and been prepared for the sudden attack, but because of a false sense of security and a fluke mentality, his people fell on the way forward, paying the price for their own stupidity. "Assault team, follow me!" Maknae shouted, his loud voice full of anger. "Spellcasters, protect your companions and interfere with their shooting." The dwarven mages obeyed the order. After the collapse of the Swamp Alliance, Maknae realized that they could no longer rely on the spellcasting power of the Blazing Star clan, so he paid more attention to the training of mages in the clan. He took the initiative to send talented dwarven apprentices to the Trade Federation for further study. Today, even the Thunderblade clan, which used to be full of armor, had a small spellcasting team. However, this level of spellcasting team could not cause much damage to Azhara's army on the castle. Their greatest use was to provide protection for the soldiers who were attacking. Under the attack of Azhara, the soldiers who were struggling to move forward were either knocked down to the ground or swept away by the sudden wind. Some of them even had their clothes on fire, and they screamed in pain. In the chaos, Maknae had already jumped to the front of the army and threw himself into the fierce battle. He raised a solid stone several meters high under the castle and threw it fiercely. The huge stone hit the surface of the elemental fluid on the surface of the castle, and at the same time, the castle's barrier was temporarily disabled. The Thunder Lord strode forward, his footsteps never stopping in the face of the towering walls. He roared loudly, and like a giant dragon, he rammed into the outer wall. The flesh and blood of a legendary warrior was even stronger than the walls of a city. A hole was actually created in the outer wall of the northern castle, and rubble rolled out far away. As expected. A smile appeared on Maknae's face. He knew that the outer wall of the northern castle had collapsed during the battle between Koer and Vagers, and the foolish Aisha people did not do their best to repair it. They simply piled it up and filled it in, making it look like a frightening thing. Now, these Azhara people would regret this and pay the price in blood. The dwarves charged forward, constantly widening the gap in the outer wall, and flooded through the bridge made of boulders and plank. A human guard rushed towards Maknae with a spear. He was a veteran, strong and agile, and also familiar with the weapon in his hand, but he was no match for the warriors around Maknae. The Thunderblade dwarves let out a battle cry and swarmed forward to hit the guard's body with their axes and flail. One of the heavy blows made a terrible creaking sound, which could be heard clearly even in the war drums, fighting, and gunfire. The guard fell to the ground. The dwarves admired this warrior, but still stepped on his body and continued to charge forward. This castle used to belong to the Trade Federation, and Shanmu had already told Maknae all the weaknesses, secret passages, and traps of this castle. He knew how to command his people to fight in the castle. The first wave of attack went smoothly. They were full of momentum and mercilessly cut down the enemy. After spending dozens of people to knock down 4 arrow towers, the Thunderblade dwarves gained control of the outer wall. Maknae climbed to a high place on the outer wall to have a good view of the overall situation. They needed to break into the depths of the castle. Once they succeeded, the enemy commander would not be able to reverse the situation with any strategy or conspiracy. This task would take about an hour to complete, but Maknae did not want to wait that long. The enemy had obviously discovered them in advance, but the attacks and resistance were not as fierce as expected. When the dwarves rushed into the outer wall, they found that only a few human soldiers were left here. It could be said that the enemy had almost given up the outer area of the castle. Maknae was a little uneasy and afraid of making mistakes. He decided to give the enemy the final blow as soon as possible, not giving them a chance to play trick. He wanted to end the battle with a clean victory. So the Thunderblade dwarves had almost no time to rest. They were ordered to gather together, and after the spellcasters gave them simple group healing and iron will, they marched into the depths of the castle without stopping. At the same time, behind the Thunderblade dwarves, the boulders on the path they took to come here began to tremble. The color changed from the brown and grayish-black of ordinary rocks to bright red, and then mottled orange. These stones were melting, and then they began to tremble as if they were given life. They pulsed and lost their original shape, melting into a pool of hot liquid. A tendril emerged from one of the pools of liquid, followed by a second, a third. These tendrils fused with each other and shortened, reforming into palms and toes. A head emerged from the top, opening an irregular mouth full of small sharp teeth and looking around with small dark red eyes. After everything was done, these elemental creatures began to walk towards the dwarves with strong legs. Macne waved his warhammer to deal with 3 soldiers with spears. He knew that the real battle had begun. The resistance of the inner wall was 100 times stronger than that of the outer wall. He was surrounded by all kinds of sounds: the sound of muskets, the roar of cannons, the whistling of arrows, the roar of spells, and the battle cries of the dwarves and the humans resounded throughout the battlefield. An elite soldier rushed towards him, but he could do nothing in front of the king of dwarves. The spear only pierced the air. Macne smashed the human to the ground with his hammer, and then with a backhand strike, he cut the attacker who cooperated with the soldier into 2 halves. Blood and organs drenched him. Blood and thunder! MacNeil roared. At that moment something seemed to have changed around them. A sound that had never been heard before joined in, a heavy growl. The dwarven king immediately turned his head towards the sound and saw the elemental creation that appeared behind the dwarves. Lava behemoths. His companion, Hakian Thunderblade, roared. Damn it, where did they come from? We didn't find them before. The lava behemoths opened their mouths wide. In the eyes of the dwarves, they were like moving fortresses. These elemental creatures strode forward, waving their arms and smashing all the dwarves who dared to come up and stop them. Many of them were easily crushed and trampled to death, while others were stunned and killed by flying stones. Steady, my fellow clansmen. Macne jumped down from the battlements. Don't look back, keep moving forward. The Thunder Lord entered the state of Holy Spirit, and the earth suddenly trembled. Many dwarves lost their footing and fell to the ground. Dark clouds covered the sky and lightning flashed, followed by a deafening thunder. Nothing can stop us. Ersala spent a lot of effort to tamper with the boulders and hide the fluctuations of magic power. They wanted to use the lava behemoths to complete the encirclement of the dwarves. Their strategy had succeeded. As soon as the lava behemoths appeared, they caused huge casualties to the Thunderblade dwarf. However, no one would have thought that Macne had the ability to crush all the magma behemoths. When the dwarf king returned with the thunder and entered the battlefield, a massacre began immediately. The bodies of the magma behemoths were as fragile as dolls. These powerful elemental creations had not even had the time to unleash their power before they were smashed into pieces by the more powerful ones. The elemental creatures fell one by one, and the morale of the Ersala expeditionary army fell. Macne Thunderblade, this dwarf, was like a god descending from heaven. He was an army alone, and no one could compete with him. Anywhere was better than facing this inhuman monster surrounded by electric arcs. What made things worse was that at this moment, flames ignited in the sky. The young red dragon, who had fought for the Trade Federation, had returned. It seemed that he would also join the battlefield. Chapter 534. Macne narrowed his eyes and looked up. He could feel the power of the dragon. There were not many things on this continent that could really threaten him, and the dragon was one of them. Not to mention that it was a red dragon, a large red dragon in its prime. It was extremely powerful and intimidating. The red dragon swooped down and landed less than 200 meters away from the dwarf. It swung its serrated tail and twisted its long neck with horns, watching the dwarf's every move. Neri Andrea? Maknae recognized the dragon. He had heard of its name before. Before the Thunderblade clan joined the war, Tashimu had invited the Red Dragon to fight for the alliance. However, the results were not satisfactory. The Red Dragon was arrogant and rude. It was unwilling to give the war the right treatment and the necessary respect. It neither had a strategic plan nor obeyed the alliance's orders. It did not cause much trouble for the Airsala Expeditionary Force. Therefore, when the Red Dragon Andrea decided to leave, the Federation did not even try to persuade it to stay. Who would have thought that it would come back by itself now? I never thought that the Red Dragon could have the spirit of a contract, but your actions have won my respect, Maknae said. He raised his warhammer and signaled to the Red Dragon. In that case, let us fight side by side and take the glory of victory. Maknae Thunderblade. The Red Dragon opened its mouth and revealed a cruel smile. The words that came out of its mouth were shocking. You are about to die. If you still have a trace of reason in that poor brain of yours, order all your clansmen to lay down their weapons and surrender to the great burning wing. He spoke in a low voice that was unique to dragons. Otherwise, you will turn into ashes under the feet of Neri Andrea like reptiles run over by a wheel. You stupid dragon, have you lost your mind? Maknae said this sentence in a doubtful and angry tone. If his ears didn't fail him, did the Red Dragon just make it clear that he wanted to go to war with the Thunderblade clan? He didn't understand why the dragon would turn against him in such a short time. Even if it had a reason to be the enemy of the clan, he couldn't figure out how it could jump out like a stupid beast without any preparation or arrangement. Perhaps this was the Red Dragon. But not to mention a Red Dragon in its prime, even an old Red Dragon or an ancient dragon would not necessarily make Maknae feel afraid. He was a warrior above the legendary level, the Thunder Lord, the King of the Iron Castle, and the god of the dwarves, Moradin. The title of Dragon Slayer was not in this series of titles, but perhaps it would be soon. The Red Dragon let out a contemptuous laugh. You will regret missing the opportunity to surrender because you have no idea what you will face. With that, orange flames gushed out of the dragon's mouth full of sharp teeth, and the battle began again after a brief interlude. The Red Dragon let out a roar that was equivalent to a large-scale Yoi spell and charged at McNeil. And then, without a doubt, he was brutally beaten up. Although he had the racial advantage, he was still only a 300-year-old dragon in his prime. Nelly's scales were capable of blocking attacks from conventional weapons, but they were unable to block the Thunder Lord's heavy axes and hammers. Nelly's proud lunges, bites, and tail swings were as slow and sluggish as a sloth in front of this divine warrior. The battle had only been going on for 1 minute, and the Red Dragon who claimed to be the Burning Wing was already covered in wounds. Its forelimbs, which were used for attacking, were bleeding from the heavy axe. One of its claws was swollen, and 2 of its teeth were broken. Even the 2 horns on its head, which were not easy to injure, were torn open. When the Red Dragon opened its mouth to bite down, Maknae accidentally jumped on its head and chopped it with his axe. Enough! The Red Dragon roared angrily after Maknae's attack failed again. You short-lived creature that only knows how to hide and run. Do you think this is useful? I am not the same as before, short-lived creature. Feel the real power. Its front claws slammed heavily on the ground. This sentence was like a spell that contained magic. As the Red Dragon's voice trailed off, a violent hurricane suddenly surged in the northern castle, and an illusory blue flame ignited around it. The whole space seemed to be distorted, and a turbulent power gushed out from the Red Dragon's body. It instantly jumped more than 1 level. "Stupid red dragon, don't you know what you are doing? This is not your power. You will kill yourself because of your recklessness," Maknae said coldly. "I have already used this power for my own use." The red dragon responded angrily. After a while, it laughed again. "You are afraid, dwarf. I smell your fear." The Thunderblade dwarf is not afraid of anything. Maknae bent his knees, clenched his axe and hammer, and was ready to attack again. "Is that so?" the red dragon roared. "I will make you see the truth." They rushed at each other at a speed that was difficult for the naked eye to see. The red dragon was no longer slow. It could keep up with the Thunder Lord's speed, and even faster and stronger. The surging psionic energy pushed its body in an irresistible manner, making it almost achieve what it wanted. At this moment, the red dragon could affect reality with its will, fabricating spells that it could not control out of thin air, and commanding the elements for its use. The red dragon was very satisfied with the taste of omnipotence. Its whole body was filled with power, and it was almost intoxicated in the violent battle, bombarding Maknae indiscriminately. However, it did not notice that its own life potential was rapidly being depleted. Caesar was not an omniscient and omnipotent god. There was no way he could raise Nelly Andrea's strength by several levels in a short period of time without any damage. The psionic seed he left behind was essentially equivalent to a converter that could convert the red dragon's long life force into psionic energy that it did not have. The red dragon felt an incomparable power after activating the seed. In fact, it was its own exuberant life force. However, whether it was intentional or not, Caesar did not tell Nelly the principle and reminded it to use it carefully. This caused Nelly to crazily consume its own life force in the battle, squandering its psionic energy without restraint. The long-lived red dragon would not notice any abnormalities for a while, but Maknae was in trouble. Nelly, who had a rich foundation, was probably better than Caesar in terms of psionic energy at this time. He could suppress the Thunder Lord to the point that it could not raise its head. Nelly crouched, the scales all over his body opened and the muscles under the scales were taut like water. At this moment, the place where they were fighting had become a fiery hell. The red dragon was a subspecies of the fire element. Even if it used psionic energy, it preferred to simulate the fire element to launch attack. The ground was burning and everything was hot. The air was filled with the smell of calcined metal. Under the unbearable heat, ashes rose and fell in the castle, as if millions of undead were around. Boom! Maknae hit the inner wall of the castle hard. These fortifications that Ilsala had invested in could withstand the bombardment of magic cannons. They were reinforced with more alchemy products than ordinary fortresses, but in an instant they were torn apart. Maknae went straight to the ground. Dense cracks appeared under his body, spreading dozens of meters away. Boom! Before he could get up, a heavy fist formed from psionic energy slammed into his chest. The armor on the Thunder Lord's body, which had been personally forged by Prince Attas, shattered. The flickering inscriptions were all extinguished, turning into ordinary metal. The red dragon slammed the ground, and the psionic energy penetrated the surface. The solid ground, which was scorched by the heat, spun and flipped open. Gravel flew everywhere, as if some terrible creature was shuttling through the ground. A huge force was transmitted through the rocks to Maknae, squeezing the dwarf's body out of shape. Layers of twisted lava piled up and wrapped Maknae tightly. The red dragon gasped for breath. The psionic energy had a huge burden on its body. Nelly felt that he was about to lose his strength, but he still shouted stubbornly, "Is that all? Dwarf, you're really disappointing." It stopped and waited for a moment. After making sure that the opponent was stunned and unresponsive, it stepped forward and grabbed the huge rock ball with its two front claws. It used its tail to drive away the Thunder Blade dwarfs that came to harass it. It flapped its wings and struggled to rise into the sky. It had been instructed to deal with Maknae. The battle in the northern castle had nothing to do with it. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.